Good evening. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Fulcher,
Present.
Councilmember Duvalla,
Present.
Councilmember Gibson,
Here.
Councilmember Siemens,
Present.
Councilmember Small,
21 MCs ate up at the same time.
Mayor Searcy,
Here.
and Councilmember Honzak is not able to attend tonight, but she will be on Zoom, but is having some technical problems.
Okay.
So we're trying to get her some help.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Just want to note a couple of quick things. The one is a change to the agenda that was posted. We will not have a work session tonight on the ceasefire resolution. The discussion is postponed until Friday, February the 28th. I'm sorry, y'all, I got a little under the weather, and so we were a little delayed with getting that resolution submitted to council members, but we will be discussing it next week. But what we will be talking about today is we'll have a voting session, first reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 budget amendment.
This is slightly updated.
Thank you so much. Budget amendment number 3. And then we will also have 2 work sessions, one on the FY25 budget priorities, recreation center redevelopment next steps discussion. And then we will also discuss discussion amending the city code to ban combustible engine powered leaf blowers. And so in terms of the upcoming agenda, on Wednesday, February the 28th, the council will meet at its regular time at 7:30. We will have a second reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 budget amendment number 3. We will have 3 work session items, a discussion of a draft ceasefire resolution, proposed multi-family housing tax credit, as well as a library construction project update. On Thursday, February the 29th, through Friday, March the 1st, the Maryland Mayors Association Winter Conference is happening. I will be attending that. On Wednesday, March the 6th, we have our city council meeting starting at 7:30. We have a few items, voting session on a ceasefire resolution, first reading ordinance amending the city code to ban combustible engine powered leaf blowers, single reading ordinance approving a contract for the Maple Avenue outfall restoration of Bashir's Run, a single reading ordinance approving a contract approval for outfall inspection and water quality testing. And then we have 2 work sessions, facilities regulations review, that is back before us, as well as a council budget working group presentation. On Monday, March the 11th through Wednesday, March the 13th is Congressional City Conference. And I know that, I think that's an NLC Congressional City Conference, and I know a few of my colleagues will be attending that. And then on Wednesday, March the 13th, we'll have our regular council meeting scheduled for 7:30. It will start with a presentation from the police department, the annual report, as well as a voting session, second reading ordinance amending the city code to ban combustible engine powered leaf blowers. And so tonight, I have the joy of reading a proclamation in honor of Lee Jordan Day. So Lee Jordan Day in Tacoma Park is February the 23rd. Whereas as we celebrate Black History Month, we take note of the life and accomplishments of Lee Jordan, one of the most influential residents in Tacoma Park history. And whereas through his work with youth, including the formation of the first integrated sports program in Montgomery County, Lee Jordan was a mentor, role model, and inspiration across racial lines, leaving an indelible mark on generations of Tacoma Park children, both Black and white. And whereas, as a leader and advocate on behalf of Tacoma Park's African American residents, he played an important role in the forging of a resilient Black community in the face of racial discrimination and economic challenges during the period of segregation and the decades that followed. And whereas, while a custodian at all-white Blair High School from 1935 to 1946, And then at Tacoma Junior High until 1973, Lee Jordan, affectionately known as Mr. Lee, ignored racial distinctions and as a volunteer began coaching white boys to play sports and in the meantime organized teams of boys from the black community across Tacoma Park. And whereas Lee Jordan deliberately and successfully overcame racial divisions by integrating black and white players on the same sports teams, and in 1953 also welcomed girls into previously all boys teams as part of the pioneering Boys and Girls Club he founded. And whereas students under Mr. Jordan's guidance gained confidence, improved their skills, and learned leadership to the point that one of them, Sonny Jackson, enjoyed a long baseball career in the major leagues. Others, such as Morgan Wooten, the legendary coach at DeMatha High School, followed in his footsteps or became school principals, and Tony Duvall became Tacoma Park Police Chief. And whereas Lee Jordan's work to break down racial barriers was recognized as a primary influence in the peaceful integration of Tacoma Park schools after the Supreme Court ruling, and many of his players went on to fill the baseball, basketball, and football rosters at the newly integrated Blair High School in subsequent years. And whereas Mr. Jordan advocated on behalf of the Black community for city amenities such as streetlights and paved roads, and led successful campaigns for a playground where Black children could play ball and families could gather, and for the construction of the Hefner Recreation Center, which became a gathering place for African Americans in Tacoma Park and nearby communities. And whereas, in recognition of Mr. Jordan's life's work, and the new athletic field at Tacoma Park Middle School was named in his honor in 1981, and he was posthumously inducted into the Montgomery County Human Rights Hall of Fame in 2006. And whereas in 1983, the city of Tacoma Park proclaimed February the 23rd as Lee Jordan Day to mark his accomplishments. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, do hereby proclaim February the 23rd as a day to be honored each year as Lee Jordan Day. So I just want to thank you all so much. We hear so much about Mr. Jordan, and his family still lives in the community, and we're just so grateful for all that he has done in our community. So excited to read this proclamation today. Next, just wanted to check to see if we have Ann. Hello, Ann. Ann Sikot is our legislative lobbyist in Annapolis, and I know that these are busy times. So I'm going to turn things over to Ann to provide us with our legislative update.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy Lee Jordan Day. That was a great proclamation. Wanted to just do a couple of quick things. The city has weighed in on a couple of environmental bills. The sort of follow-up to the Climate Solutions Bill from last year, the RENEW Act, responding to emergency needs for extreme weather, and the Warmth Act, working for accessible, renewable Maryland thermal heat. I actually very much appreciate when somebody can put together a really good and appropriate acronym for something meaningful. So we weighed in on those bills. We also weighed in on the fire safety bill, Nicole Diaz fire safety bill that was created. They tried to pass it last year after her tragic death, and had to come back with, I think, a better bill this year that I think has a better shot at passing. So those are the things we've been weighing in on. And then just for those who like to follow a lot of the housing stuff, the governor had a very lengthy hearing yesterday on his legislative housing package. That includes some pieces that are around the development of housing and also some renters' rights. So those things are moving. We'll see what gets traction and what things survive the amendment process.
Great, thank you so much, Anne. Quick question for you. For the SHA bills, I think Delegate Charkoudian's bill the hearing is tomorrow, correct?
Correct. And I'm not sure we're going to have a physical presence there for the hearing tomorrow.
I can be there if you need me to be there, Ann.
I appreciate that. Just because of the deadlines, the deadline's already passed for signing up.
Okay,
All right.
all right. Thank you, Anne. And so just want to triple check with that one. So for that particular bill, we could still submit something in writing, correct?
We can always send in what they call late testimony, but we can absolutely send it. You know, we've got everybody's emails. We can make sure everybody has it and submit it for the bill file.
Okay, perfect. Right. Yeah, I think the Senate one is. I can't remember the date, though.
And then I thought there was another SHA bill next week that was not Lorix.
Not 100% sure. So, Anne, we just want to confirm the SHA bills. I know that there was one that Laura had, and I think that there's, and that one, the hearing for that one is tomorrow. But I think, has the Senate passed on that one, or is the Senate hearing coming up?
I'm looking up the bills as we speak. So if you bear with me for a moment.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, that's okay. I don't mind. Part of it is remembering exactly the bill numbers. The one that is around the pedestrian and bicycle safety bill is both are actually being heard tomorrow in the House and Senate.
Okay.
And then the other SHA bill, I need to check on that one. I'm sorry. There's a lot of bills on our bill chart, and that's not a bad thing. There's a lot of good stuff that is out there. And I'm sorry, I didn't have it in front of me. It's Melanie Nicole Diaz. That was the fire safety bill. My apologies for not having that stick in my head. And just, there it is. The other SHA bill, there actually isn't a cross file. It's just a House bill.
Oh, okay.
That's why I couldn't find it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Councilmember Small, did you have a question?
No, as far as I know, we are banging some stuff out tonight in the middle of the night. Make sure we have it tomorrow to send in.
I think we can. I think because we've passed the deadline,
We just go ahead
we
and do
could
it a
just
little later.
write it and
Okay,
then
solid.
send it forward separately.
All right, sounds like a plan.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Small, hit your light for me.
Oh, my bad.
Okay. All right. Seeing no more lights. All right. Well, Anne, thank you so much. I know that you've been keeping us on top of getting these testimonies turned in, and I appreciate you for it. And so we'll touch base to just make sure that we have adequate coverage for the next round that will need to go out this week.
That's great. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Okay, so do we have any voting, any public comments on voting items this evening? And just as a reminder, the voting items are the first reading ordinance adopting, approving the FY 2024 budget amendment number 3. Come on down, Arthur.
Arthur David Olson, Ward 4, Herbie Hancock Avenue. Budget Amendment Number 3 seems incomplete. Budget Amendment number 2 provided $500,000 for a payment to Neighborhood Development Company, NDC. Only about $398,000 ended up being paid. Budget Amendment number 3 does not seem to reflect the $102,000 reduction in expenses. After this year's fiscal budget was approved in May, we learned that the tax-exempt status has been lifted for the site of the abandoned hospital. Given the July 1st, 2023 assessable property value of $17,509,000 and the city's tax rate, there should be an unbudgeted increase in tax revenue of about $96,500. That increase does not seem to have been reflected in any budget amendment to date. With the end of the agreement with NDC, the city is losing revenue paid by them. However, there has been, quote, an assignment to the city of NDC's rights under the sublease between NDC and the Tacoma Park Silver Spring Cooperative. So the city should be gaining lease revenue paid by the co-op. NDC being a for-profit company, I assume that it charged the co-op more for use of the parking lot than it was paying to the city. So the city's revenue should be going up. Budget Amendment number 3 does not seem to reflect that increased revenue. And finally, with the proclamation of Lee Jordan Day, I note that while Montgomery County controls street names, the city controls its own street name signs. I hope the council will add a line item to Budget Amendment number 3 to fund the modest expense of replacing 3 street name signs that now read Lee Avenue with signs reading Mr. Lee Avenue. I also hope the council will inform the county council once the signs are in place and invite the county council to take action. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on voting items? Okay, all right. Do we have any comments, general public comments this evening? I just want to ask, I believe that there's a couple of folks that have videos that need to be shown first, just for AV reasons. So come on down if you're showing a video.
Good evening. My name is Leanna Smith. I'm in Ward 1. I do have one of those videos. I just wanted to first say, as a little girl here back in the 70s, Mr. Lee Jordan was an amazing figure in a lot of our lives. He was sort of larger than life and an incredible generosity of spirit. So thank you for the proclamation. As many of you know, I work with children, 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, every day. And that's why I want to play this clip tonight.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We turn to Gaza, to a case that's reverberated around the world. 2 weeks ago, January 29th, 6-year-old Hind Rajab climbed into a car with her aunt, her uncle, and her cousins in Gaza City as they prepared to flee to the southern part of Gaza. But as they were in the car, an Israeli tank approached them and opened fire. Hind's 15-year-old cousin, Leon, called the Red Crescent for help. These were her last words recorded on the call with a Red Crescent dispatcher.
Hello?
Hello, dear.
They are shooting at us.
Hello?
They are shooting at us. The tank is next to me.
Are you hiding?
Yes, in the car. We're next to the tank.
Are you inside the car?
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
That was 15-year-old Leon's last words, killed along with the rest of her family. The only one who remained alive was 6-year-old Hind. Wounded, she called the Red Crescent back, pleading with the dispatcher to be rescued.
Come take me. You will come and take me?
Do you want me to come and take you?
I'm so scared. Please come. Please call someone to come and take me.
Okay, dear, I will come and take you.
After seeking approval from the Israeli military, 2 emergency workers with the Palestine Red Crescent, Yusuf Seno and Ahmed Amadoun, went to try to rescue 6-year-old Hind. But dispatchers lost contact with the medics. Nearly 2 weeks later, Israeli forces finally withdrew from the area, and on Saturday, Hind's surviving family ventured back to the neighborhood. They found Hind dead inside the car, alongside the bodies of 5 of her family members. The car was riddled with bullet holes. The bodies of the 2 emergency workers were also found in an ambulance nearby, appeared to have been killed by Israeli fire just yards away from the car. This is Hind's mother, Wissam Hamada, after she learned of her daughter's killing.
My heart is completely destroyed over my daughter. 2 weeks. They killed them. 2 weeks they were in that car.
I really want you to hear the voice of that child and of that both children, and call for a permanent ceasefire and letting in of humanitarian aid. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments this evening? Come on down.
Hi, I'm Jackie Shetler. I live in Ward 6. I just wanted to reiterate the calls for a ceasefire. I don't think you have to agree about everything about this conflict to know that this is wrong and that our town should say something in support. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Can I close this? No. Where's the, oh, I just need to be able to see the timer. Oh, there we go. Great. Hi. Mark Sherman, Hancock Avenue, Ward 1. 3 things tonight. First, this afternoon, 3 of 4 lanes in Tacoma Junction were shut down when a yellow box truck going the wrong way on Grant entered the intersection illegally and took down a couple of communications lines. Pepco responded, and there were police officers trying to manage the whole situation. Buses were being diverted around BY Morrison Park and down Lee. It was a disaster, but it was a predictable one because the one-way nature of Grant is not sufficiently signed. There are a couple of signs for people coming out of the automotive business, so they know which way to go, but there's not a do not enter sign at the end of Grant saying don't you dare enter the junction, and that's what's really needed, along with a couple of other signs. I'll follow up with a letter to the city manager. Second, I've spoken recently about the plans by SHA to rearrange the junction at Carroll and Philadelphia, which is a response to the concerns that I and others have raised about the problem they created when they widened the sidewalk from 5 feet to 7 feet at Carroll and Philadelphia. And it should be remembered that all of their plans are an attempt to solve a problem of their own making. There was no problem until they took that sidewalk that was already expanded from 4 feet to 5 and made it 7. What I would like is for the council, or for the city manager, or for both, to ask that SHA go through a formal notice of public notice and comment process so that the public, people like myself, people who live in the area, including pedestrians and bicyclists and bus riders, not just people who operate businesses in the junction, have a chance to weigh in on what's happening there. Finally, I want to express my appreciation to my own council member, Ms. Fulcher, for the work that she's done since coming into office. She has come to my apartment building to see what happened when a contractor took down some limbs on a much-loved tree outside our building. She has walked with me through the neighborhood. And I know every time I come here and hear the mayor run through the list of what's on the council's agenda that it's just this extraordinary lift to tackle all of these topics. So for you, Shana, and for everybody else on the council, I just want to express our appreciation for the work that you're doing here. It's not a small job. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening? Come on down.
This is more like an announcement, I guess. So I'm a member of the Village of Tacoma Park. I'm the chair of the membership committee, and it's come to my attention that we are struggling in many ways. We have, I guess the pandemic's made a big impact on our ability to get members and volunteers. But when I go around talking to people, I often find people think, oh, I'm not going to sign up for the Village. I'm not 55. Well, we can have people of all ages sign up. We do need people of all ages. We need new people, younger people to help us, because those of us over 55 are mostly running the Village, and we need new blood, so the Village will be around for the future generation. So if everybody can sort of pass the word that this is an organization that everybody should join, whether you're 55 or older. And it's for all of people in zip code 20912, and that's something I had only just realized this week. Good thing, because I'm the membership chair, and now I know it. I hadn't realized that all the Rolling Terrace area, we could service them, because the Silver Spring Village services 20910. And I won't get into the fact that there are a few 20910s in the city of Tacoma Park, so they're within our village, but that's too much detail for tonight. So please don't wait to sign up. Please join us and pass the word. And we really need more people helping us keep this program alive. Thank you.
Ma'am, could you say your name, please, for the record?
Peggy, thank you so much. Come on down.
Good evening. Jessica Landman, Ward 1. I'm here this evening to urge each of you to take a close look at the county executive's comments, which you each would have just received, that meticulously document the flaws in the MMPA that is pending before you. He and his staff have taken a very close look at this document and have really spelled out the many pitfalls that it has regarding affordable housing, environmental assessment, transportation, enforceability of the plan, among many other things, such as the procedural flaws that have occurred in the process of adopting it. It's not too late for this city, I believe, to act more forcefully to defend our unique character as a town and the stature that we have as the best defender of less well-off citizens and residents in our county, and protecting what makes us uniquely protective of racial equity and inclusion and the rights of renters in the way that we handle our system of rent stabilization. So please don't fall prey to that siren song, "We need more affordable housing," as being applicable to a situation here in Tacoma Park when, as the county executive lays out in his detailed comments and his careful analysis, the net result of that applied in our case would actually be less affordable housing under this draft MMPA. Instead, let's work together to find the resources to retrofit and modernize the buildings that we do have in Tacoma Park, and also let's work together to get the Piney Branch School the upgrade and new classrooms that we deserve and have long deserved here instead. There's also an opportunity that I see to seize on the many people's agreement in this MMPA, looking at the aspects that there is a lot of consensus about that have to do with the WAU part of the site, that were not controversial and that do have a lot of widespread support. So I urge you to look to those components and to seek true community consensus to build upon, instead of fighting and looking to unnecessary battles that could only lead to a more divided community. This MMPA is only the beginning, because a second master plan amendment has already been teed up that will affect another part of Tacoma Park. So we are going to be setting precedents here that determine our planning board and council's way in which it deals with the city and interprets Thrive as we look forward to the future years. And so this is our opportunity to look closely at the approach that the county executive is taking and to join with him in demanding better for this first MMPA that will shape our city for the next generation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any more general public comments?
Linda Pence Gunter, Ward 1. I just want to take a moment to express my appreciation to all those who've spoken here in favor of a Gaza ceasefire resolution. I'm really glad you're addressing this promptly, even more so in light of the latest disgraceful U.S. ceasefire veto at the UN. With that now on your upcoming agenda, I'm here tonight to suggest another resolution. U.S. House Resolution 77, introduced in January 2023, calls on the United States to embrace the goals and provisions of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The House resolution has been endorsed by our Maryland Congressman, Jamie Raskin, who we can proudly boast is a resident of Tacoma Park. Cities and municipalities can also pass their own version of this resolution, and indeed, during the course of the past 12 months, 70 cities and 6 counties have done so, including, I'm happy to say, Montgomery County, Maryland. It's past time for Tacoma Park, one of this country's first nuclear-free cities, to join that number. Luckily, this is very easy to do. Back from the Brink, the network that initiated the U.S. House resolution provides on their website a sample resolution for you to use. You can also view other city resolutions for guidance. Plagiarism is encouraged. Tacoma Park was the first city in the country to declare its compliance with the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. That came on the initiative of the now abolished Nuclear-Free Committee of Citizens. Since you stated that the city staff could easily, your word, assume the tasks of the committee, I imagine you will see no obstacle to city staff getting this resolution done. You also said you could ensure the city's compliance with the nuclear-free code by consulting Don't Bank on the Bomb. The new edition was published today. So I also presume that the city staff who have assumed the tasks of the Nuclear-Free Committee have their copy. However, if you do consult Don't Bank on the Bomb, you will have to declare Tacoma Park out of compliance with its nuclear-free ordinance, as the city does still bank on the bomb, despite efforts for years by the Nuclear-Free Committee to change that. I'm really hoping that city staff is indeed plugged into ICANN and Back from the Brink and other networks that will ensure Tacoma Park stays current with the many nuclear-free initiatives in which this city should be an active participant and even better, a leader, as it was in the past. If that isn't the case, then maybe the suggestion previously made in this chamber, by you, I believe, that the city should establish a nuclear-free office to manage all of this should be given serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Good evening, Jimena Musa, Ward 6. I'm glad to hear there's a draft resolution. I know we sent one forward that was based on the resolution passed by Durham, North Carolina this week, so plagiarism is encouraged. I will say, as a lawyer trained in international human rights and humanitarian law, there's a couple of pitfalls I hope get avoided. One is a reference to terrorist or terrorism. There's no internationally accepted definition of terrorism in international law. It doesn't exist. It's a highly politicized term. Second, I would also not refer to Israel's right to self-defense. I understand the instinct, but know that as an occupying power, the Israeli government actually has a duty to care for the civilians under its control versus a right to self-defense. And any right to respond also under international law must be proportional, which this response has been anything but. There's a lot of good language out there to call for a ceasefire, understanding that it is the only thing, a negotiated truce has been the only thing that has gotten aid to Palestinians and gotten hostages home. I'm going to read a poem. I hope I don't get cut off. It's a very good one. It's called We Teach Life, Sir, by Rafif Ziadi. She wrote it after the 2008 and 2012 bombings of Gaza, before the 2014, 2018, 2021, 2022, and current bombing of Gaza. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre that had to fit into sound bites and word limits. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre that had to fit into sound bites and word limits filled with enough statistics to counter measured response. And I perfected my English, and I learned my UN resolutions. But still he asked me, Miss Ziadi, don't you think that everything would be resolved if you would just stop teaching so much hatred to your children? Pause. We just want to tell people about you and your people, so give us a human story. Don't mention the words apartheid and occupation. This is not political. You have to help me as a journalist to help you tell your story, which is not a political story. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre. How about you give us the story of a woman in Gaza who needs medication? How about you? Do you have enough bone-broken limbs to cover the sun? Hand me over your dead and give me their list of names. In 1,200 word limits. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre. I actually skipped some of this, so I have to go back. And 100 dead, and 200 dead, and 1,000 dead. And between that, war crime and massacre, I went out words and smile, not exotic. Smile, not terrorist. And I recount 100 dead, 200 dead, 1,000 dead. Is anyone out there? Will anyone listen? I wish I could veil over their bodies. I wish I could just run barefoot in every refugee camp and hold every child and cover their ears so they wouldn't have to hear the sound of bombing for the rest of their life the way I do. Today, my body was a TV'd massacre. And let me just tell you, there's nothing your UN resolutions have ever done about this. And no soundbite I come up with no matter how good my English gets. And no soundbite will bring them back to life. No soundbite will fix this. We teach life, sir. We teach life, sir. We Palestinians wake up every morning to teach the rest of the world life, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other general public comments this evening? Okay. Do we have any virtual public comments?
We do. We have a virtual, a video comment, and after that, we'll have the Zoom comments.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, my name is Margaret McDonald, and I am a resident. I live in Tacoma Park on Triscott Avenue in Ward 2 with my husband and my 3 kids. And I am sending a message in support of the Tacoma Park City Council calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. I understand that the Middle East is historically and intrinsically complicated, and Israel certainly has the right to exist and to respond to the attacks of Hamas on its civilians. I'm not questioning that, but the way that Israel has responded, decimating Gaza, killing more than 30,000 people, which is it's almost double the population of Tacoma Park, bombarding innocent people by gunfire, bombs, warfare, destroying hospitals, schools, and homes, and terrorizing innocent children and their families for nearly 5 months with full impunity. And not only that, but billions of dollars in support directly from the U.S. government is horrendous, it's criminal, and it's immoral. As a mother, I cannot imagine living under those conditions, fearing for the lives of my children every minute of every day. Not only that, but Israel's tactics aren't working, and in fact, they're only furthering hate and division, endangering Israelis, and frankly, putting a larger target on the back of the United States. We in Tacoma Park pride ourselves on our progressive values, our ideals, our advocating for peace and humanity. And so it is time, or past time, in fact, that we take a stand and pass a resolution in support of a ceasefire. Thank you.
Thank you. And
sorry.
No worries.
Here we go. Our first commenter is Gabriella Smith.
Hello. Forgive me, I'm going to be reading off my notes. It's currently 3 a.m. in my time zone. My name is Gabriella K.L. Smith. I'm a citizen of Tacoma Park who, like my mother, grew up in this city. I'm also Palestinian and I currently live in the West Bank. It's been agonizing to watch the genocide of my people happen a few miles away from my apartment, to hear F-16s fly overhead hourly on their way to go bomb Gaza. The city council made comments about community safety regarding a possible ceasefire resolution, and I want to ask which community is in dire need of safety. Surely it's the community that in 4 months has had 1.4 million people forcibly displaced, 30,000 people massacred, thousands more unfound under the rubble, whose healthcare system has collapsed as tens of thousands of injured await treatment and disease spreads rampant, and who is collecting rainwater from muddy puddles to drink water. Surely this is the community you speak of. While I'm not living under anything close to the horrors in Gaza, the Israeli occupation forces have increased their violence in the West Bank as well. There are hourly and daily military raids into the West Bank. 2 days ago, the army was outside my apartment, and down the street, they were firing live ammunition. 3 days ago, they were outside the school I teach at. During these raids, they arrest dozens of Palestinians without charge, which makes them hostages, not prisoners. Over 7,000 of these hostages have been taken since October 7th, and the reports of torture and starvation in the prisons has increased tenfold. During the prisoner exchange, when we had a temporary ceasefire and women and children were released by Israel, the army tried to suppress any celebration of their return. Their families had their houses raided on days of their release, destroying their belongings and threatening worse if the families celebrated. When I and many others went to go greet the children and women at their release point, we were fired on with live ammunition and tear gas. Even my doctor had his practice raided, all of the glass smashed. They later returned and arrested him, and he's currently under detention. I know firsthand that the Tacoma Park City Council has the power and can find the resolve to pass a ceasefire resolution. In 2003, I organized a group called Tacoma Park Kids for Peace, which for years held weekly and later monthly protests to stop the war on Iraq. We worked with community activists to pass a ceasefire city council resolution against the Iraq war, and we can do it again. I don't know how many of my people's bodies you need to see on your screens to make you understand that this is genocide, but hopefully 30,000 will be enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next commenter is Kate Phillips Barrasso.
Thank you very much, Mayor and council members. I want to speak today as a citizen of Tacoma Park and a proud resident of Ward 6 in the hopes of inspiring action by the city to adopt a resolution in support of an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, as a growing number of municipalities across the United States have over the past few months. I work at a humanitarian organization that has provided assistance to people in Gaza since 1986 and is currently doing its very best to provide assistance under dangerous and near impossible circumstances. Every one of our 70 Palestinian staff has been displaced, often multiple times. Several have had family members killed, and every single one is spending the majority of their day trying to find their and their family's next meal. In the wake of October 7th, the citizens of Gaza have been plunged into an abyss of suffering. In the span of just 5 months, a staggering 30,000 people have been killed, the majority of them are women and children. Over 69,000 have been injured, and thousands are missing or entombed under the rubble of buildings. Civilian infrastructure, including hospitals and schools, continues to be bombarded, and something around 60% of housing units have reportedly been destroyed or damaged. I want to underscore that there truly is nowhere safe in Gaza for anyone to go. What's worse is what little humanitarian aid is making it into Gaza by organizations like mine is barely scratching the surface for people who have had water, food, electricity, and other critical services actively cut off to them. So that's now 2.2 million people. That's every man, woman, and child in Gaza now requires humanitarian assistance. And as a result of that, over 90% of the population faces high levels of food insecurity with a risk of famine. And I stress the word famine, which is hard to even say in this context, for up to a quarter of the population in the coming months. These figures and estimates, which by the way are conservative, indicate that deaths from starvation could surpass those from airstrikes in the month to come. This is the highest percentage of food insecurity ever classified for a given area or country. The humanitarian community continues to call for a full and long-term ceasefire as the only practical way that we can prevent the civilian death toll from bombardments from climbing. Beyond protecting civilians, it's quite literally the only way that we can provide and scale up humanitarian aid to an adequate level. We simply cannot deliver aid in an active conflict zone with no guarantee of safety. Without an indefinite ceasefire and full restoration of critical life-saving services, civilians will continue to die either from bombardment, starvation, thirst, or illness. As a humane city, one that continues to stand against harm to civilians and for justice, I urge you to join a growing chorus of Americans and American cities calling for a ceasefire and urging our national leaders to exhaustively pursue all measures to achieve one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Rick Weiss.
I appreciate, I'm Rick Weiss from Ward 3. Wanted to say that I appreciate that the council is at last considering joining hundreds of other U.S. jurisdictions that have banned gas-powered leaf blowers, communities including DC and Montgomery County. And I encourage you to stick to your proposed implementation schedule, which will synchronize well with the county's schedule. I'd also like to provide some added rationale for this ban beyond the noise issue that this ordinance focuses on. It's true, of course, that leaf blowers are obnoxiously noisy, with each use creating a noise disturbance affecting many surrounding city blocks. Studies have found that even short-term exposure to this kind of noise can temporarily raise blood pressure and increase blood viscosity, which are serious risk factors for heart attack and stroke. But noise is not the only reason to ban these scourges. Over the course of just 30 minutes, a gas-powered leaf blower can spew the same amount of unburnt hydrocarbon pollutants as a light-duty truck traveling from New York to Los Angeles. They also stir up so-called PM2.5 particles, which can lead to asthma and emphysema. And they generate wind speeds that are literally as intense as a Category 4 hurricane, seriously disrupting insect and microbial communities that perform essential ecological services. But there are two improvements I want to strongly recommend that you make to the proposed language in the new ordinance. First, as currently drafted, the ordinance would allow leaf blowers to operate at sound intensities of up to 70 decibels. That's a very high limit compared to what most health agencies recommend. The World Health Organization recommends limiting daytime urban noise sources to 45 to 55 decibels. Some U.S. communities have set limits as low as 40 decibels. That's a lot quieter than 70 decibels when you consider that the decibel scale is logarithmic, meaning that for every 10 points of increase in the decibel scale, you're actually doubling the volume. Takoma Park has already a daytime noise maximum of 65 decibels for most activities, but has had a carve out for leaf blowers to be as high as 70. With the elimination of gas leaf blowers and the switch to electric, which are generally quieter, the city should get rid of the 70 decibel allowance and hold leaf blowers to the same very generous standard as other everyday noises at 65 decibels. Second, the current ordinance allows operators of leaf blowers to use their equipment continuously on a piece of property for 2 full hours. 2 straight hours of leaf blowing at any volume is extremely disruptive in our generally peaceful city, where many people work from home. The time limit should be an hour at the most. It is not hard to get even a large yard job done with a full hour of leaf blowing, especially if you do some prep first with a rake and do the final cleanup of sidewalks and driveways with a broom. Finally, I want to encourage the council to take advantage of the educational campaign it's going to mount when it makes this transition and remind residents about some basic rules already in place in our community, including a rule that's routinely flouted by homeowners and lawn care companies, namely that it's a violation to operate powered lawn equipment, including leaf blowers, before 9 a.m. on weekends. That rule gives weekend mornings a fighting chance to be peaceful for the first couple of hours of the day. Thanks for at last bringing our city up to modern community noise standards with this pending ban on gas-powered leaf blowers.
carrying like it normally does. All right, thank you all so much.
We have one more
We have
comment.
one more.
I'm very sorry.
Okay, no worries.
It's Naomi Edelson.
Okay, welcome Naomi.
Hello, I have two comments I want to make about two things dangerous. One is the intersection of Erie and Flower Avenue in Ward 5. When you're coming out of Erie Avenue and trying to go left, it's completely blocked by parked cars. I've brought the city public works director to show her it. I've been told that they don't want to remove the parking spots, but it's extremely dangerous. My son is just getting his license, and I am terrified of that spot. And it's even become worse, of course, with the new businesses, which we appreciate, but it's completely unsafe. And I would like to request either a stop sign there or removal of those parking places. It's been a real problem for a long time, and I brought it up to the city, and it's not been resolved. So I request that you take action. Thank you. The other thing is that I want to say that's very dangerous is I think I'm not going to say very much. I've sent all of you comments, but I was only made aware of this resolution on the ceasefire 2 days ago through my through Kara sharing it in her newsletter, which I appreciated. And I am not in support of a resolution. I feel like it is a very divisive thing for the city and will lead to danger for the Jewish community all over the country. We're seeing huge increases in anti-Semitism. People are calling for the death of all Jews. They are making campuses incredibly hostile. All the Jewish community are looking for alternative schools. They're looking at which are the worst. As you've seen, it's been in the news. There's like assaults happening, and we need to create a peaceful way to talk with each other and be together. Our country is turning into a mess through all this uncivil discourse, and I think this resolution will lead to more divisiveness, an unsafe environment, and I really urge you to reconsider whether the impact in our community is appropriate. There are lots of ways to make your voices heard individually and through our members of Congress. This is not the appropriate place, and I believe will lead to real problems. That movie that was shown back when a few years ago was a problem. The Jewish community still talks about it, and it's just, my heart breaks for both peoples, and I think that is the appropriate way to think of this. What can we do to help both peoples? And I too wish there was a ceasefire, and it was broken on October 7th, unfortunately. And I'm really sorry and feel terrible. And my family who lives in Israel is it's just horrible there as well. And I just don't think it's useful for the city to take this stand. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other virtual comments?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, and so before we move into council comments, we have the pleasure of having Caleb Bond from the Youth Council to provide us with a Youth Council update.
Ward 6. Ward 6 now. Ward 6.
Good evening, council members. My name is Carla Bond, and I'm on the Tacoma Park Youth Council, as well as a freshman at Blair High School. I serve as the council's Ward 6 advisor, as well as the city council liaison. Although it is my first year as the city council liaison, it's my second year on the youth council. The topic that I would like to discuss tonight would be the youth council's progress so far on upcoming projects or events that we have planned. As of right now, we have 2 ongoing projects. The first one is the I Voted sticker art competition. We have restricted it to ages 12 and up to make the design more competitive, and it's for the adults who have voted, and they will receive it after they put in their ballots and receive the votes. The second event is we would like to host a basketball game at the recreational center off of New Hampshire Avenue as a way to introduce the Tacoma Park Youth Council to the public. And we see no other way as to get the community together as sports or a good old-fashioned game of basketball, because who doesn't like basketball? But As of right now, that's all the events that we have planned for the rest of our terms, and we would appreciate your support by publicizing this information, such as putting it on the website for the Tacoma Park Youth Council or putting it on the newsletter so we could get more publicity and more people could show up to the events. If you have any further questions, please email the Youth Council or my email, which I could send to you all again if you would need. Thank you for your time. Good night.
Thank you so much. Don't run away. I have a quick question.
Of course.
So how long is the contest? I love the I voted sticker design contest. So how long is that contest going to go?
Our timeline isn't exact, but we would like to have it start before the actual ballots are in place to put in, because we don't want to have rushed amount of time. So we would like to have time for people to make their art and choose. We get to choose a winner. We also, it's in the air. It's not official, but we have thought about giving the winner a prize so it would make it more competitive and more people would like to do it. But that's it so far.
No, I absolutely love this, and I'm looking at the city clerk to make sure that we're able to make sure that we work with the Board of Elections to make sure that we can kind of help the Youth Council with marketing the design idea and making sure that we're able to.
They've already reached out.
It's already done?
They've already been doing that.
Oh my gosh, you guys rock. This is awesome. I'm so excited. I think this is a great idea. And basketball, do you all have a date in mind for the basketball?
That's also not finalized, but we plan to have it done by the next meeting.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. This is wonderful.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Can I just real quick?
Yeah.
Because you guys might leave before we go to break, I just want to point out, because I knew you were working on this, I was talking to Rainita, and she just happens to be out there working at the desk. And she's a strong supporter from the Recreation Department with youth and basketball. And so you might talk to her because she's done stuff like this before. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This is a great update, and I'm super excited about what the Youth Council has planned. Okay, we're going to move on now to council comments. We'll start with Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I'd like to begin tonight by talking about Lee Jordan and Lee Jordan Day and black men as role models and the importance of doing that and trying to model some sort of reasonable behavior to kids. It's important because I sit in the parking lot before I come into these meetings to get myself mentally prepared. So I watch the kids who are friends with my son when they do their hooping and whatever else in the playground. And one of the things that's happening now is the inevitability of birds and bees and changes in the way people interact. So there was a snatching of a backpack and all kinds of little flirting things. And so I played Cool It Now by New Edition really loud in the parking lot. And so I wanted to talk about the differences between de facto and de jure segregation, discrimination, any of those kinds of things. Because it's really easy for people to say something about something when in fact you have voted with your feet in a different way. So since we're talking about the minor master plan in perpetuity, I'd like to refer to the beginnings of this. There's going to be a couple of quotes in here. I apologize, Mayor, if it goes a little long. So the first part, these are both from the introduction to the minor master plan. It says, throughout the mid-19th century, the area that would become Tacoma Park remained, oh wait, hold on, let me do the first one first. Yes. Remained primarily rural and agricultural. Large amounts of land within the plan area were owned by members of the locally prominent Blair family, who enslaved the black workforce to farm their lands and manage the households. These early occupants included Henry, a coachman, and Nanny, a cook. The Blairs used the Sligo Creek stream valley for recreation, where they had established a riding trail prior to the Civil War. The land was sold, became a city. Next section, same thing. Benefits of the growing town were not shared evenly. Black residents who had begun to settle in Tacoma Park shortly after the community's founding, were socially and geographically isolated by widespread racial discrimination. In the early to mid-20th century, discriminatory housing practices, including the use of racially restrictive covenants, channeled the black population into 3 distinct areas of Tacoma Park. The largest of these, the Hill, formed around 1920 in an elevated hilly area on Ritchie, Geneva, and Oswego Avenues. In the same period, African-American residents of Tacoma Park organized the Colored Citizens Association to advocate on behalf of their communities. And as the city expanded civil services and began to provide streetlights, paved roads, and public utilities such as electricity, water, and sewage to white communities, black communities saw that their neighborhoods were consistently overlooked. Through decades of legalized racial discrimination in the early and mid-20th century, the CCA advocated for the fair provision of public services to black communities. And I bring that up because that's also Lee Jordan. Same people, he is integrally involved in this. And we don't ever talk about that. We don't talk about the fact that now that we have a lot of big houses on that road and more traffic calming activity on that single road than any other place besides right around the VFW, that those things, in fact, look like institutional racism dynamics. Just like being concerned about the safety of people who are materially safe when people are being bombed. And so at the end of this, I would just like to say that on Lee Jordan Day, as the black dude who has to sit here, highly competent, maybe overqualified, who has to do this for the benefit of the community, that it is not easy to do. And so being respected by your peers and the community for the sanctity of your mind or your talents is important. Being respected by your staff for your mind and your talents is important. And being respected by the institutions that do not serve us very well is critical, because that's the way things get better. And so I will remind you all that in the vernacular, so as you have done to the least of your brethren, you have also done to me. And that's just not cool. We ought to be better people. You ought to be concerned about other places besides the 5-minute walk around your home. Thank you.
Councilmember Gibson?
I'm sorry. Did you?
Yep, sorry.
First of all, thanks to the many commenters and the poignant comments that are made. And I do look forward to the council looking at putting together a resolution that will that would address the issue. One of the other issues spoken about tonight that I just want to touch on briefly, the intersection changes at Carroll and Philadelphia that Mark Sherman has been just phenomenal in bringing it to our attention. I have contacted several businesses that would be affected by the proposed change by State Highway Administration. It does seem like an unstructured process of commenting, and I do want to consult with my colleagues in terms of whether a response by the city to organize the public response and the businesses affected would be better than doing it individually by business or by person. I'm just not sure how best to address this issue, which the SHA does not, as I said, seem to be handling in a transparent and open way. And then lastly, I just want to comment on the county executive's comments in terms of the minor master plan. I do hope that they get posted on the city's website. I do think it's important that it show some balance or some differing perspectives that to contrast with the planning board. I just read a few passages from those comments from our county executive. The plan proposes recommendations that exceed the definition and scope of minor master plan. The proposed changes would allow as much as threefold increase in the number of housing units, adversely affecting one of the county's most affordable, diverse communities. The plan does not include racial equity. Without a racial equity analysis, it's a major disconnect. Despite the potential of 65% increase in traffic volume in the area, the plan does not include a traffic study. With its focus on upzoning the multifamily apartments, the plan emphasizes redevelopment over reinvestment. Also, the minor plan should be limited to the Washington Adventist site, and there's a recommendation that would be better served by 70-foot-high site. I encourage everyone to look at those comments. I think they're very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Councilmember Fulcher.
I want to, I'm especially thankful to people that have come out to talk about the ceasefire. I am not an international relations person. It's not what I focused on when I was going through college. And so when residents reached out to me and said, what can we do to support a ceasefire? I welcomed them to please come and give public comment and to take up the space in the city with your public comment, with the things that you care about. And so I appreciate that so many of you have come out to do that. In particular tonight, Ms. Musa, I really appreciate some of the verbiage that you gave us to avoid as someone who doesn't specialize in international relations. That was really helpful, so thank you for that. I'm excited that we have Lee Jordan's Day on the same agenda that we have the Recreation Center, because the intersectionality of that, of the opportunity to make a better recreation center, especially over in a ward that is heavily populated by minorities, is an opportunity for us as a council to do better. So I am really excited about that. I am going tomorrow to celebrate Black History Month with my husband on a date to the Library of Congress. We're going to go visit Rosa Parks's peanut butter pancake recipe, which I'm very excited to do. And I think about her a lot and how Blacks needed a perfect person in order to make white people pay attention to how Blacks were being treated. And I think about the stress to be a perfect person and how she had to keep on doing that to be that icon, and that no one has to be perfect in order to deserve respect. I think about that with our mayor and with fellow Councilmember Small, and how it's important that they don't have to be perfect and that they're still able to represent the city. I also read the county executive's comments, and speaking of being imperfect, I was disappointed to not see any offers of what he was going to give to the city with his turning down of what was suggested in the minor master plan. And so I look forward to hopefully hearing more ideas of what the county might do in Tacoma Park in order to support the housing that we already have. It is not always wealthy people that own buildings, and we are forcing them to keep the rent stabilized, and so they don't always have ease to reinvest in those buildings. And so I'm hoping that Montgomery County will be telling us what they will be doing to help us support that housing. And as has been brought up many times, it is time for a new Piney Branch, and I'm looking forward to promises of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Just going to check to see if Councilmember Honzak has any comments.
Not tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no more lights, I'm going to be brief because I don't think my voice is going to hold much longer. But I do want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I really, really, really appreciate all of the personal stories and the thoughts that have been shared across the spectrum in terms of the ceasefire resolution. We're working diligently to ensure that what we put together brings us together and doesn't tear us apart, and making sure that everyone that is impacted directly or indirectly can feel seen and heard, while sending a clear message in terms of what we think would be the most beneficial to all, particularly as it relates to humanitarian aid delivery. So we're working on that, and so we'll be talking about that next week. Also, thank you to those who have highlighted the comments that the county exec has raised regarding the minor master plan. I want to align myself with Councilmember Fulcher in stating that, keeping things the way that they are is not the answer. There has to be some way for us to ensure that there are improvements to the quality of housing on Maple Avenue. It doesn't take much. You just need to walk the floors, right? And so what can we do to make sure that if it's not about density and adding potential additional revenue streams for some of our, particularly given the number of nonprofit deed restricted properties that are on Maple Avenue, then what resources can the county provide to help us with making the necessary building improvements to ensure that people in our community, particularly those that have the least among us, have the ability to live with dignity and respect and pride in terms of where they live. And Piney Branch, I've been beating down the door on that one for a while, and mayors before me have as well. So I really would have loved to see, I'm writing into the CIP money for Piney Branch in that nice letter too. So maybe people are writing, maybe there's an ability for that to be included as well. So with that, I'm checking the time. I don't think there's any items this week other than I do want to, and I have this on my calendar, to remind people of an event that is happening. The Explore the Soul of Langston, the free performance that is on Friday here in the community center. So if you're looking for things to do in celebration of Black History, I want to encourage people to come out and check that out. That is something that I am planning to attend as well. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn things over to our city manager, Mr. DeSpirito, to go through the city manager comments.
Yes. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council and guests. Thank you for this opportunity. I have a relatively brief report given the conversations that we have to come this evening with on the agenda. From the Housing and Community Development Department, on Friday, February 23rd from 7:30 to 9:30 p.m., please join us in the Community Center Auditorium for Tacoma Arts' Soul of Langston one-man play. This play reveals the wit and wisdom of Langston Hughes' poetry and the worldwide impact of his literary career. And there's only a little more than a week left for public art submissions. Housing and Community Development Department is seeking proposals for a sculptural installation outside the Tacoma Park Recreation Center. The sculpture should reflect a theme of welcome or crossroads. The call for artists will close on March 3rd. A link with more information will be posted on the city manager's comments section of the city website tomorrow. From Public Works, the city will be planting 86 trees in the public right-of-way over the next couple of weeks. The planting is being done by Casey Trees. Information about this past tree planting efforts can be found on the city's website, which includes an interactive map of public space tree planting locations by year. A link will be included in the posted city manager's comments. Also from Public Works. Not long ago, the Maryland State Highway Association Administration completed a project on Carroll Avenue, which included the resurfacing and new roadway markings, replacement of curb ramps, installation of bus stop pads, and new sidewalk between Merwood Drive and University Boulevard. After the completion of the work, concerns were raised about the intersection of Philadelphia Avenue and Carroll Avenue. The sidewalk and curb ramp on one side of the intersection was widened to address pedestrian ADA access regulations, they said. This resulted in a narrowing of the roadway at the intersection and has caused difficulty for buses traveling west on Carroll Avenue and turning right on Philadelphia Avenue. And I believe, as the Mayor and Council knows, over the past several weeks, MDOT staff have been receiving comments from residents, businesses, and council members regarding this situation. I just wanted to report this evening that city staff is actively in the process of engaging SHA regarding these concerns, and an update will be provided once we have some definitive information for all of you. And finally, for employee highlights, I would like to give a special employee shout out to Danielle Murphy, Administrative Assistant in the Recreation Department, for successfully managing Summer Camp Registration Day. The city received over 100 signups within the first couple of hours, and her commitment, Danielle's commitment to accessibility, flexibility, thoughtful troubleshooting, and overall ease in this process for our residents exemplifies the city's commitment to outstanding customer and community service. So we congratulate and thank Danielle. I'd also like to acknowledge all city employees who have been working this season in the extreme cold overnight and in the early hours of the morning. This is predominantly Public Works employees and Police Department employees, but there are others. And all of those folks, I just wanted to say publicly on behalf of all of us, thank you for bearing these hardships on behalf of serving our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. DeSpirito. Okay, we're going to move on to adoption of minutes. So the minutes from December the 6th of 2023. Would someone like to move?
I move.
Do I have a second? Okay. All those in favor of adopting the minutes from December the 6th of 2023, please say aye. Aye. Do you have any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, perfect. All right, so we're going to move into our voting session. So we have the first reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 budget amendment number 3. Just confirming with city staff that there have been no changes to the budget amendment since we last saw it. Correct?
Correct.
All right, so would someone like to move the first reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 budget amendment number 3?
Mayor, I don't know if it's a point of order or if you wanted to at the discussion part, but I do have a question.
Yeah, we could do it at the discussion.
All right. All right.
Yep. All right, would someone like to move?
Moved.
So moved.
Thank
All right,
you,
seconded.
Councilmember Fulcher. Thank you, Councilmember Smiles, for second.
Discussion, Mayor?
Points of discussion. Go ahead, Councilmember Smiles.
Yeah, I just wanted to inquire about the potential veracity of the discrepancy between what we think is the money and what diligent and present citizens think is the money with regard to the adjustment here. My understanding, I would think, would be that some of the things that were addressed in comments, in public comments today, would be addressed at the final readjustment budget, but I didn't know if that was an explicit thing that we wanted to have someone say or not.
Yeah, that was my question too.
Yes, staff is always pleased to have an opportunity to respond to questions as they arise. I know that there's been some email exchanges, and first of all, we very much appreciate the degree to which our Mr. Olson and others pay attention and look and care about what we're doing. So we have that opportunity, and I believe that on a prior question, detailed question from Mr. Olson. We had, Susan, I believe, had provided a detailed response. We're happy to respond to any additional questions that may, that have or will arise before final adoption and consideration by the Mayor and Council.
But I think the main question, and just want to confirm, there are certain things that need to be, as I like to call it, reconciled first before you can actually include them in the budget amendment. So things like total amount of taxes that maybe we will receive from the Washington Adventist Hospital site now that it's back on the rolls, or you know, there's still some dust that needs to be settled in terms of aspects of the NDC settlement. And so some of those numbers need to be, we have $500,000 in the coffers for various reasons because there are different things that need to be addressed. NDC only got paid the amount that they got paid, but that final amount has not been completely clarified just yet in terms of where the monies go. And so therefore we're still holding the 500,000. So I guess that's a very long-winded way of saying there are certain things, and I think I said this during our last council meeting, there's this particular quarter or budget amendment number 3 is always the hardest for me, because there are certain things that you kind of have to wait until that last budget amendment, or even to get your final numbers when you're actually doing your actuary report.
Yeah, that's sort of what I thought. That's why I was asking.
Right.
Like, I'm not saying that anybody lost any money or
Yeah, no-
anything like that.
Yeah,
Just-
no, it's just, that some of these things have to be settled once you kind of get everything, all of the receipts are in and everything is finalized. So I just wanted to confirm that we're in that situation, to Arthur's point, and I wanted to raise this before, but that's just where this particular issue is.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct, Madam Mayor, and we not only anticipate I'll say an additional budget amendment before the fiscal year is completed, Budget Amendment 4, for a variety of reasons, we'll find that necessary. But ultimately, there is a reconciliation of all accounts at the true end of the fiscal year, and those are, that reconciliation occurs as we begin to close the books on the fiscal year and ultimately provide the reports and prepare for the audits that would be coming with that closeout. So
Thank you.
You are correct.
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no more questions, given that this is a budget amendment, I think we have to do a roll call.
Yes, and also because we have someone online.
I keep forgetting that, I'm so sorry. All right, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Fulcher? Yes. Councilmember DeBala?
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yes, approved.
Councilmember, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Honzak?
Yes.
Councilmember Small?
Harumph.
Mayor Searcy?
Aye. All right, so this will come back to us for a second reading. All right, and so I'm going to give, before we go into our work sessions, give everyone a 10-minute break. And then we will reconvene at 9:05. All right, thank you all. to our work sessions for this evening. So the first item is the FY25 budget priorities, the Recreation Center redevelopment next steps discussion. As is now common procedure, we have a 20-minute presentation followed by a 30-minute Q&A. And so with that, I am going to turn things over to our city manager, who will kind of introduce the topic, and then we will have a discussion.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. Staff is very pleased to bring this item to you and the public this evening. As you indicated, this is a work session for that relates to our FY25 budget priorities, Mayor and Councils, and that is the Recreation Center redevelopment next steps discussion. And Mayor and Council is in receipt of I think an initial introduction to this item that came with your packet last week, but we'd like to present, with your permission, a presentation to you and the public to walk through in much greater detail some thoughts from staff on this topic. And this refers to the Tacoma Park Recreation Center located at 7315 New Hampshire Avenue, and redevelopment options and proposed next steps for Mayor and Council's consideration. We'd ultimately like to entertain any questions from the Mayor and Council, listen to your comments, and receive any direction that you so desire. So at this point, it's my pleasure to introduce Ira Cowler, our Acting Director of HCD, who will walk us through this presentation on your screen. Ira.
Thank you so much. Madam Mayor, members of council, Ira Cowler, Acting Director, Housing Community Development. Good to see you all tonight. So as City Manager DeSpirito mentioned, I am here tonight to present first on the Recreation Center redevelopment update. Our objectives for this work session tonight: we'll review current status of this project, we'll present some financing strategies, budget implications to consider when we talk about the future redevelopment potential of the site, and then finally we'll review some redevelopment options and hopefully have a rich discussion on next steps. Again, as mentioned by the City Manager, this was identified within Resolution 2023-40, your FY25 Council Budget Priorities, where you identified take next steps to advance development of the Tacoma Park Recreation Center. I know we are all familiar with this site, but just for context here, the site is located at 7315 New Hampshire Avenue. This is in the New Hampshire Avenue corridor, just south of the Tacoma-Langley Crossroads. This site, as you can see on the map here, is outlined in orange, the parcel. Parcel is a little bit over 1.8 acres, and the zoning for this site, rezoned in the 2012 Tacoma-Langley Sector Plan, is CRT 2.0, C 2.0, R 2.0, H60. I know we're all very familiar with these zoning categories now, but just as a refresher, so this is a mixed-use zone. It allows a 2.0 FAR density, and you see the height of 60 here, though as you'll recall, additional height is allowed for additional affordable housing units as well as additional public facilities and public offerings, such as a recreation center. I've listed here a few available incentives and programs based on the parcel, and I'll also point out that the city does currently have within our FY24 budget 2 available funding resources devoted to this site and to this redevelopment project. Unfortunately, not enough to finish the project, but something to get started here. So $160,000 allocated from ARPA. If you recall, there was an original ARPA allocation for some maintenance work on the existing facility. The remainder is for this redevelopment project. And we also have a matching grant from the State of Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development through their NED, National Capital Strategic Economic Development Fund, for $145,000. And again, both those are FY24 allocations, so active funding. A brief refresher on the project timeline. This is a project that we have been working on collectively for quite a while here. So 2011, 2012, we began with corridor planning. This was the Tacoma Langley sector plan that I referenced earlier. That was a land use and zoning review of the corridor, made some specific recommendations for the recreation, what we call the recreation center site as well, including exploring mixed-use possibilities on this site while retaining recreation facility uses as well as maintaining some of the existing public green space, tree space on the site itself. 2015, the city commissioned several site analysis tools, including some design and concept plans, a recreation maintenance review plan as well, that both laid out some general potential massing options for the site, as well as some very rough cost estimates in 2015 dollars, obviously. 2017, 2018, the city did an initial test of the market, releasing a letter of interest for developers, received, I believe, 6 responses at the time, but did not decide to take action on any of those responses. 2018, 2019, the city officially acquired the property from MNC PPC. This was a land swap, and part of the agreement was that recreational services would remain as an offering as part of the site. 2021, the city conducted additional community engagement around the site. This was the activity led by Brick and Story Consulting, which gained additional insight into both how the existing recreation center is used, additional recreation services folks were interested in, as well as other community interests. And then lastly, over the past 2 years, we released a recent request for proposal seeking potential development partners for the site. And if you recall, we were last here to discuss this issue in July when we presented kind of the 2 responses that we did receive to that RFP. Staff did not recommend at the time moving forward with either of those responses, and we'll get into that a little bit later here in the presentation. Okay, so a current staff assessment of the site and of the project itself. So it feels important to begin with the big question, which is cost. So based on some comparables, based on existing square footage calculations, staff are estimating that a new recreation center is likely going to cost around $15 million. This is, again, kind of a rough order of magnitude estimate here to kind of give us some numbers to work with. But just for frame of reference, we're currently in the middle of the library renovation project. That project is a site that's, I believe, a little over 20,000 square feet, about 23,000 square feet, an original budget of $9 million that has increased as time has gone on. And as for a recreation center, we're obviously looking at a new state-of-the-art recreation center that would include one of the core components we've always looked at was a new full basketball gym, including bleachers. So some large expenses that would go into a recreation center. So again, this is kind of a best guess estimate without obviously full design plans, even a full concept of what a recreation center would look like. This is kind of a number for us to work with here moving forward, $15 million. And I think the important thing that I'll be emphasizing throughout in this proposal, but I'll start right here on this slide, is that there's certainly ways for the city to defray some of this cost. But none of these options that we're going to discuss tonight at the present moment are going to completely eliminate that expense for the city. There has to be some sort of city contribution if we want to get this project over the finish line. So that's a little bit of what we're going to be talking about tonight, is both what that expense could look like, what our appetite is for that expense, and what are some of those options that might best defray that expense. Okay, so how can we think about project costs? So I'm a little scared to present this slide, so I'll just emphasize that these are very rough estimates, and these are worst case estimates, right? So if the city had to cover that full $15 million cost of building a new recreation center, what might that look like in terms of impact on the city budget, city fiscal health, right? So we did some quick calculations, kind of assuming that the city would bond out $15 million and then be responsible for debt service to pay back that bond issuance. So you see here a little bit of what those numbers might look like, again, in that worst case scenario where the city decided, hey, we're going to go full bore ahead. We're going to figure out how to pay for this rec center all on our own, get that $15 million expense fully bonded by the city. So just real quickly, that would look like approximately a 4% tax increase on an annual basis for 20 to 30 years while we paid off that debt service, which would equate to, you see here, I did some very quick calculations. For a property that's assessed at $600,000, that would be about a $250 increase to their annual tax bill. For a property that assesses at $800,000, that would be over a $300 increase on their tax bill. So just some large numbers to think about here as we progress. Certainly that number can be offset by a number of factors that we can explore. So state bond bills, the city has worked with the state to allocate funding on capital projects in the recent past. That is probably a $250,000 opportunity. You have federal earmarks that the city could also explore for these types of projects. Certainly the city can re-engage the county on recreation partnerships in terms of both bringing financing, bringing services into the facility. And then we have some of the public-private partnership opportunities that we've talked about in the past and we'll discuss again tonight. So does a disposition of the lot, maybe does the lot sale value help cover some of that expense for a recreation center? Does other public-private development incentives help to bring that cost down? And again, like I said, I'd be emphasizing a lot in these slides. So in the current market, none of these options are going to eliminate that entire cost for the city. They will bring these numbers down, right? They'll bring a 4-cent tax rate down to something else, but they're not going to fully eliminate the need for the city to contribute something in the current market to getting a project going at the rec center site. All right, so I just wanted to walk through a few kind of options that staff see to consider moving forward here and walk through kind of the pros and cons and potential next actions for each of those options. So the first option, as always, is the status quo. Continue with current rec center operations. Second option is a city-led project. So this is where the city would build a standalone recreation center on the site. Third option would include some sort of land swap or acquisition where the city might seek alternative sites or ways to enhance the existing site that might better meet council priorities. Fourth option would be to re-engage the 2023 RFP respondents by moving forward with a potential selection from that release. And the fifth option would be to go back a bit to the drawing board with an updated RFP. So refining the needs and offerings, as we'll get into in a little bit. I believe when we came in July, one of the things we talked about was that we asked for a lot in that RFP, right? We wanted that site to be a lot of different things, and we hoped that it could be a lot of different things. So maybe by both refining those site expectations, the scope of the project, as well as potentially what the city's willing to offer within the project, we might be able to solicit additional development partners or more feasible responses. Okay, so as I said, we'll walk through each option in a little more detail. Option one, we can probably be pretty quick with this one, but status quo, the city continues with current recreation center operations, and uses any existing funding we have to improve the current facility. Obviously, the pros are that this is probably the cheapest option and would allow for quick investment. I think the cons are that we've obviously been going through a long process. We have identified that this recreation center facility is not satisfactory for the needs of our community, needs replacement, and obviously this option would not result in that. All right, the second option that I laid out was a city-led project. This is where the city would build a standalone recreation center facility on the existing site. Some of the benefits of this is that this would clearly define project scope and requirements. As we talked about, we've kind of been growing the scope of this project over that decade, right? We started with wanting a new recreation center. We added, can we meet some affordable housing goals or market rate housing goals on this site? Can we add open space on the site? Can we add additional access to New Hampshire Avenue to Sligo Creek on the site, right? So if we focus just on a rec center, obviously we kind of clearly define that scope. We're able to laser focus our efforts and our funding on that core goal of a recreation center. So it would also give the city the greatest control, obviously, over the project design, the construction, the timeline. We would not be working with a private partner and not be working on kind of a larger development site that would require both more financing to come in, more approvals to come in, and greater work and greater timeline. And since we would just be focusing on city services, there may be new avenues open for additional funding like we discussed earlier, either from the state or the federal level. As far as kind of cons and challenges for this, first of all, again, I'll give you a preview. This is what I will mention a fair amount here. This project would still need to identify funding, right? We would maybe be able to find some avenues for some of that, large figure, but we would still need to contribute a fair amount since we are just building a recreation center here for the city. And in considering that, this project would then probably compete with other ongoing and planned city-led capital projects. Just to be explicit, we have the library renovation that's going on that I believe has another 12 to 18-month construction timeline. We have the Atrium project that has identified funding and I believe an identified timeline. So if there was funding to be identified to this project, it would either have to come on top of that or wait in line behind those projects. And lastly, kind of in line with that, since this would just be the city taking city land, doing city work with it, there'd be limited opportunities for explicit private investment to defray some of those project costs. So if that's an option that council has interest in, gives direction to proceed, some of the next steps are that the city would probably use some of that existing funding that we have to solicit and select a design firm there are design firms, national design firms that kind of specifically focus on municipal recreation facilities, right? So we would look to identify a partner who would help both with the design and identifying financing for the project. We would obviously have to identify city funding commitment and timeline for the project, and then we'd have to begin that advocacy process with our government partners to help close that financing gap as well. Okay. Option 3, a land swap or acquisition. As I mentioned, this is an option where the city would seek alternative sites or enhancements to the existing site to make potential redevelopment more feasible. The site, while, as we discussed in July, the site has a lot of potential as a recreation facility, but if you want to do more than that, it becomes pretty challenging. It becomes a lot more constrained than it might appear. There's not existing access onto New Hampshire Avenue except through a by right easement on another property. A good portion of the property is tree canopy at the moment that might be impacted if you try and do a larger site. And as well, if you recall, both the responses we received to the 2023 RFP both proposed underground parking, right, which would be a substantial expense and substantial additional due diligence would probably be required for that. So is there an alternative site that is currently privately owned that the city might be able to identify as a potential land swap for a more attractive site for the city, or that can somehow defray some of these costs? Or is there a way, again, to enhance the existing site and make it in some ways more attractive for that kind of mixed-use development? The challenges with this are that at the end of the day, I guess I'll speak from my staff recommendation, which is I'm not fully convinced that this would have kind of a real significant impact on project costs. There would be land acquisition costs that would be required if we're acquiring other sites that would likely kind of cut into whatever benefit we'd get from disposing of the existing site. We'd still kind of have that question of how are we building a recreation center after this. Additionally, this would kind of require additional time to review and negotiate any sort of new acquisition of land. And lastly, would also, I say would likely, but would most assuredly require a renegotiation of our existing acquisition of the property from the county, since we did identify that the property would remain for recreational services. So I don't anticipate that being a huge issue necessarily if we find an appropriate site, but it would be another kind of layer of process to consider. So if we wanted to move forward with that, you certainly could direct staff to identify alternative sites, begin some conversations with private property owners around their interest in exploring new opportunities for their site, exploring the existing site the city has, we could kind of obviously continue those conversations offline with private property owners and see if there's something here, an alternative site that works. As a part of that, though, and identifying other sites, kind of really narrowing in on this scope of what the project is and what our needs would be for that site would be critical in terms of how we approach those conversations. All right. So moving forward, option 4, re-engage the 2023 RFP respondents, excuse me. This would be where the city would move forward with potential public-private partnership by identifying a development partner from our 2023 RFP release. Would continue the existing process and kind of not add additional time if we're looking to do a public-private partnership, and would allow a partner to immediately commence some of those pre-development activities that we've discussed as kind of one of the big question marks on the site. And certainly, as with any public-private partnership, this process could defray some of the project expenses through the land sale of the property itself, the parcel itself. If you recall, when we talked in July about the responses that the city received, staff did not recommend moving forward at the time because we didn't really see either project as feasible, right? Projects either had what could be construed as kind of significant financing gaps or significant challenges to get kind of over the line, right? Neither of them, I think the term we used, were kind of fully baked at the moment, right? So that doesn't mean that they can't be fully baked if we give those respondents time to get there. You know, both teams were highly experienced teams with a lot of experience doing the types of projects they proposed. Certainly, if we're willing to kind of give them the space to evolve those projects, maybe there's something there for us to explore. But based on the projects we did receive, you know, those projects still have a significant cost gap that would need to be overcome, and that would not be solved just by going back and saying, one more shot, let's see what you got, right? And the other thing to kind of note just about any public-private partnership, as I mentioned before, is that it would really extend the project timeline as well, right? There would be a lot of other components to a project. It would take a bit more time for us to get to the phase where we're putting shovels in the ground and then seeing a new recreation facility. So something to just be aware of when we think about all of these public-private opportunities. Again, if this is of interest to council, we would re-engage those RFP respondents. We would return to council with a full presentation, either of the original proposals or of updated best and final proposals from the respondents if they are still interested in participating. And then we would propose a process for entering into kind of a very extended exclusive negotiating privilege period where we would not be committing any obligations until kind of financing issues and that financing gap was addressed, but we would at least allow a partner to begin some of those due diligence proceedings, some of those pre-development activities. All right, and the last option is an updated RFP. So the city releases an updated request for proposals with more limited recreation center asks and anticipated city funding commitment. So this option would be substantively somewhat similar to the previous option, which I see I've maybe mislabeled this option. So this one's option 5, apologies. But would be substantively similar to the last option, but with the acknowledgement that maybe we didn't get as many responses last time because we did ask for the moon. And so maybe if we kind of refine that scope a little bit more, and also refine a little bit more what the city's willing to put into a project, what we're willing to commit to a project, we might get more attractive proposals or more meaningful proposals that better meet the city's and city council's priorities. Okay, so I'll just quickly run through this one. Updated RFP expectations may lead to new proposals, as I mentioned. Those new proposals may better meet city goals. And the last thing, which I haven't touched on too much, but we touched on in July, was one of the challenges we've had is a staff capacity issue, which I'm always wary of bringing up because I am part of the staff capacity issue, which is that we don't have a economic development staff member on the team at the moment, or a staff member fully focused on economic development. The hope would be that these capacity issues would be addressed by the time we release a new RFP, would give us more opportunity to both promote that RFP and get additional responses. Again, the challenge is this would extend the timeline even further. And, you know, I think there is probably a fair question as to would we really see hugely different proposals or hugely different responses from that kind of release, or is the site what the site is and kind of what we got, which were, you know, 100+ unit, LIHTC affordable with a rec center at the bottom and a big funding gap, kind of what we can expect from this site and what we should look at. So again, future decision points here. Staff could come back with some recommendations on what a refinement of that RFP scope would look like, and certainly would solicit feedback from council and guidance from council on that. We would then develop and release an updated RFP. And again, we would still need to kind of talk about and identify what that city funding commitment looks like for the project. Again, not $15 million, but you know, what is kind of the amount that the city is willing to put in to kind of address a potential gap in the project. All right, so, and I promise I'll leave this particular slide or these questions up so we can dig into them together in a minute. But these are kind of the outstanding questions that we wanted to, or I wanted to leave council with to kick off our discussion here. So the first one, and most important, what is the city's appetite for funding the recreation center project? Is there a dollar figure or some sort of tax implication that council is willing to consider to advance the project? Secondly, how important are the non-recreation facility goals for the project, that kind of project creep that I've been hinting at here? Are those kind of priorities for the project, or are those things that, if they don't address that project financing gap, are things that we should not be unduly focused on? Third, how does the recreation center project compare to and relate to, timing-wise, other ongoing and identified city-led capital projects? And lastly, is the existing site the preferred location for a recreation facility? So both is it the right space, but also is it council's preferred space within the corridor for a recreation facility? So don't worry, I promised I'd leave those questions up on my last slide, so they are on the left there of the slide in the italics. But I also just wanted to point out some staff conclusions and recommendations here. So staff conclusions: within the current budgetary constraints from both general city operations and existing capital projects, it is not realistic for the city to fund the construction of a new recreation facility at that time. At the same time, there's no option that we presented tonight that would currently fund a new recreation center without significant city contribution. A public-private partnership likely still represents the best opportunity to defray city costs for a new recreation center, though it will not address that full project funding gap. So the staff recommendation here is that council and the city manager work to devise a realistic funding strategy and timeline that could include such things as additional financial considerations from the city or adjustments to the expected project scope. And I've outlined a few proposed actions here. You know, I'll just point out, I think what kind of we're looking for tonight is both guidance on that funding question, guidance on that scope question, but also some guidance that might help us direct ourselves as to how we're going to spend some of that existing funding to advance an option here that keeps the project moving forward, understanding, again, that there's bigger questions that we will still need to work through over the coming year here. And with that, I thank you, and I'll pause for you all.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Acting Director Keller. This has been a very thorough outline, not only of the history of the rec center, but also of the task that's before this council. And so I'm definitely looking forward to hearing my colleagues' thoughts. I think where we are right now in terms of this project is a bit of an impasse where we need to make some decisions and provide some clear direction in terms of how we want to have staff proceed. Because I think that we're at a point now where we've turned over every leaf and we've kicked over every rock, and now we need to just make some firmer decisions, not only around the scope and the goals, but also as it pertains to funding sources and how we're looking to make sure that those monies are available. So with that, I do want to make sure that I know that Councilmember Honzak is virtual. And I believe that we have the questions. Everyone has the questions. So I do want to just make sure that everyone sticks true to your thoughts or your comments around the outstanding questions that staff have for us in terms of what is our appetite for funding a rec center project. Is there a total dollar figure or tax implication that the council is willing to consider? How important are the non-recreation facility goals for the site? How does the rec center project compare to other ongoing and identified city-led capital projects? And is the existing site the preferred location for a rec facility? All right, Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I got a couple of things, and I will. I'll try to preface or make my comments brief. The first thing is that if there is an alternative site that the staff has considered for a recreation facility within the city of Tacoma Park, it would be a good idea if they told somebody where it was. Secondarily, I have a couple of things to say. The first thing is, if you go to maryland.gov and you go to local government infrastructure financing solutions, and just bam, first page. The first thing that's on there is a truck, fire truck from Myersville. But the second thing is the $4.5 million construction loan that we got for this building. Now I know that those loans are operated at different interest rate levels. Probably around, it used to be around 3%. I don't know where it is now. Payback schedules are different, and you have to schedule them. That wasn't in your presentation as an option, and I think that is intriguing. I think the next thing is, as you consider things concerning a indoor sports facility, I would encourage you to decide that since this has been an issue for 20 years, it is an important issue. It is not an issue that kicks down the road. There are no cans to kick. There is no other thing but this. And so I am curious about whether or not you have considered the option of a steel building, which would be at about $50 per square foot, and also whether or not a pole building was considered. I also would be curious about whether or not, I know that the design issues have changed with regard to these kinds of facilities, but people are still advocating for domes. None of those things were parts of this. And I think that that's important because ultimately, there are financial considerations to building anything, and there is a suasion or shame with anything. But I would challenge a city that has wasted so much of my time on the minor master plan to consider some of these other options, because the primary use, as per the contract that we have, is for recreation. I don't care about the copse of trees that is there. And I think that it is a mistake for us not to consider buying the additional land on the other side. We could get a steel building built there for at least a third of what it is that we are proposing here. And sports tourism is a reality when there are very few places to play. So if we're going to put a bunch of courts up, we could have volleyball in there, or we could have futsal in there, since our futsal is so well attended that people come from Howard County and other places to do it. I don't mean to be difficult about this, and I don't mean to kill the messenger here, but we are not trying here to build a rec center, and I want us to start trying to do that.
Well, Councilmember Small, I think that is the purpose of tonight's meeting. So it sounds like, because we have some very clear direction that we need to provide to staff. So it sounds like
Steel building, corrugated building, pole building, different sizes, sports tourism, removing the trees, those sorts of options are all things that I would have expected to see by now in this. I would also say that I am not interested in revisiting the pre-existing RFP, and that we need to just have a new RFP that promotes an innovative and hopeful design for people who have never gotten the respect that they deserve with regard to the continued operation of this building and the lack of proximity to other places to play.
So Councilmember Small, I'm trying to be extremely explicit. So are you saying rec center at current site?
I am indeed saying that because no one has articulated that we have an additional site that is available to use.
I think what the staff is,
Additionally, since we do have an existing MOU with the county to use that site for recreation, I would assume that to some degree they have some density concerns or an overall goal, since they're not providing very much overall stuff within the confines of this city, that at least they consider that somewhere there may be people rolling balls around in a hard court surface in that area. So I would assume that we would want to continue to do that. Thank you.
so Councilmember Small, I just want to make sure I'm summarizing the core questions at hand for everyone, and I need for people to be very explicit. Rec center, current site, okay with borrowing money to do it.
Okay with borrowing money to do it. Okay with looking at alternative sources for sports tourism. Okay at looking for public-private partnerships in order to operate said venues. I don't care. We need a rec center. We need a rec center. We need a rec center.
Okay, Councilmember DeBala?
Thank you for this thorough review. I gotta confess, I'm also a little disappointed that we aren't further, because we need a rec center, and I do feel a little bit like the previous council had this conversation a few years ago, and the same answer still seems to be where we need to be. And I would echo the concern that we try to make some concrete, no pun intended, progress here. Because we do need to serve residents who live throughout the whole city, but especially in that part of town. Appetite for funding, I have some, not a lot. I'm more interested in whether we need the admittedly Cadillac, can we get the Volkswagen?
Yeah.
And so one of my very specific questions back to the rec staff, because they brought it up the last time we talked about this, is what can we do in the scope to both reduce construction costs, as was just alluded to, and to reduce some of the, we'd love to have them, but do we have to have them? Second question, non-recreation facilities. My understanding over the years I've followed this is that those were in large part a way to get the bill down. And so yes, affordable housing on New Hampshire Avenue, great. There are other places. We're working on one right now, right? So primarily as if we can somehow do a partnership with someone for either additional recreational or commercial, or we settled on multifamily because that seemed to be the one that put the best package together, then I'm still there. 2, 3, I don't know, other than the library, of any other comparable capital projects that the city's got facing us. All along well, I guess I think of that as part of the library. But all along we have kind of queued them up that way. Finish the construction on this one, take the construction on the next one, take the construction on the next one, and it's rec center time, as far as I'm concerned. Is the existing site, I also haven't heard a lot recently about other potential sites on New Hampshire Avenue that might somehow be in a partnership trade. if such a thing exists in real time, I'd be interested in it. But that neighborhood is where we need it, give or take. So, did I hit all the points here?
So one of the things that I do just want to reiterate to my colleagues, given that as the former Ward 6 person, I was beating this drum about a rec center for many, many years. The site is small. We are asking for a lot, and we don't want to pay for anything, which means we have gotten nothing. I mean,
So I did
that's
just say
just
I
what
would
it
be
is.
I would be open to paying.
So
Or borrowing, as the case may be.
I think the question before us is, if we are wanting to do something that is mixed use, what we've heard time and time again, and I encourage people to go back to the many years previously when there were whole presentations where we had those 6, I guess the LOIs, letters, yeah, where people were walking through the idea of doing mixed-use development on that lot. And what we heard them say time after time after time is that the space is not large enough to do both. That you need to find another place to put the rec center, and then you have housing on the lot. And that's what we heard a lot. And then with this last proposal, there's still a funding gap, but what they also said was, hey, it's going to be hard. We're going to be able to make it work, but the only housing, it basically becomes, again, another LIHTC build. So the finance stack, given that the difficulty of that site to do both is hard. So that's why I really am pushing for folks to be explicit that I am a firm believer. I want something in Ward 6 in a part of our community where we don't have recreation or strong city presence. But when it comes to alternative sites, I think what staff are proposing is that they would then have to commit time and energy to do the legwork to build relationships with property owners in the area to try to identify whether or not there may be other parcels available. And they may never manifest, but if that's something that we want staff to do, then they would need to focus there versus using what limited resources we have to push towards design of a building on a site that we may not want to ultimately use. So that's why I'm trying to get people to be as explicit as you can, because this kind of debate is the reason why we haven't really moved, because we want everything in one place, and it's we're being told multiple times it's not really feasible to have.
So may I
Yeah.
can just respond to that? So I guess I didn't get that message quite so loud, having been along this road with you. But if that's what, if the staff agree that that's what we're hearing, that a multi-use building isn't actually going to help, then I'm fine with that. Let's not go down that road anymore.
I mean, I
But
think
I'd
what
like
they're
to confirm that
I
with
think
the
what they're
staff.
saying is you could have it, but you need to pay for it. So
If I can,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
With your permission.
Yeah, sure.
And I've tried to look at this with some fresh eyes, and
Please.
looking at everything with some fresh eyes, and
We need
I,
help
first
on
of
this
all, I commend the mayor and council and past mayor and councils for identifying that as a need, because staff couldn't agree more that the current facility, which was not originally constructed or for most of its life operated by the city, I think in relatively recent future it became ours, is inadequate. We couldn't, I just want to establish that fact, that there is no, not only is there no resistance from staff to that concept, we embrace it. We embrace the need, and we would love nothing better than to find a path forward, and we want to continue to work with you in finding that path. The obstacles are large, and it's a lot of this is a financial, math equation, particularly if we are talking about the scope that has been up to this point identified by the community, which doesn't mean it's locked in. It may be up for some revision or modification in terms of the size and the type of facility that it could be. Ira, I believe the 15 to 20,000 square feet from which we estimated costs derived from a process whereby the public was engaged and elected officials were engaged. So that's how we, to get to a number like 15 million, which by the way isn't in today's dollars necessarily. We know that even if a green light was given tonight from the standpoint of, go bond it, our actual expenditures will be a number of years into the future and subject to some inflationary bump, up, not down. And so we realistically, matter of fact, that's about the same size and cost as the library, but that was the scope of a project that had been previously identified. This mayor and council has the ability, of course, to revisit that and decide whether, well, and I'm not advocating for it, but I'm saying literally you have the ability to decide whether this should be a smaller or larger concept than the 20,000 square feet that's been identified to date. But staff is working off of a scope that has been previously identified, and thus the numbers. Okay, if it could be, could it be a different type of recreational building? We're happy to explore that. I think I've heard, pole building, steel building, dome, different architectural types. I mean, there's things we could consult, but for what most communities build as recreation centers, you try to build something that will stand the test of time. There won't be a maintenance cost, burden in short order. For a quality building, there's generally a square foot price that you can assign to that. And that's been researched, and the number we derived was based on comparables, not just our library project, but other rec centers, as I understand it. So the number's probably pretty sound for the scope that's been identified to date. So that, again, I present as an opportunity for you all to comment to staff whether that scope should be altered, particularly if the price tag seems to be too large. The other thing I'd like to comment on is with respect to the RFP. I think it was a very creative approach and a wise one on behalf of the city to do that initial RFP, request for proposals, whereby you tried to get a cost partner in this. And combining recreation with another urgent need in this community, affordable housing, is admirable. To that end, you gave appropriate direction to staff in the past year or so and to do such an RFP. Unfortunately, what came back was just 2 responses, and neither one was responsive ultimately to the scope, at least as I interpret them in reviewing it, in that neither one proposed any cost contribution to the rec center component. Yes, there were 2 companies that were willing to build housing there, and yes, they were willing to provide space for a rec center, but they said that price tag belongs to the city. That wasn't exactly what we were looking for, because it was that idea of hey, would there be enough benefit derived from their development of housing that they could, again, become a cost partner? Maybe not pay 100% of the rec center, but maybe make a significant contribution. Maybe having that would be a marketing tool or otherwise valued amenity for the housing. And thus, maybe an enlightened developer might be willing to contribute to the cost of the rec center. Unfortunately, that's not what came back. None of us control what the market will say to us. So one of the options that Ira has mentioned here is to potentially reissue an RFP utilizing what we've learned from the first RFP, maybe honing the focus a little bit. Maybe that means the size or what type of facility it is. But in addition to that, what could we do that would be more of an incentive for a developer to include paying for a substantial part of a rec center. You know, would it be, and just hypothetically, it's not a recommendation, but I'm saying things, comparable projects that I've been aware of in my career might involve a tax rebate, some sort of a tax consideration. It might be that we're not selling them the land. We own it. We're already not receiving any taxes on it because it's city property. Would we instead say, as an incentive, hey, the price of the land is $1, but you're going to put significant money into a rec center? Okay, I'm not sure the first RFP laid out explicitly some of the options in terms of incentives, and that's not a criticism. I think the first round it was wise to just kind of put it out there and see what you'd get before you maybe dealt away some incentives. But seeing that we did not get any takers, now there's an opportunity, if it's the mayor and council's pleasure, to come back and say, okay, let's broadcast some of those incentives if we ultimately agree on them, and see what the market response would be. You know, that is probably, at least in my opinion, the best way to get a cost partner and a way to do a quality rec center where it isn't exclusively the taxpayers paying for that over a long period of time in debt service to a bond, a very large bond. We are still paying on two projects. I mean, we have the library bonds, which have a lengthy period attached to them. There's also the community center bond that isn't completely paid off yet. That might be in several years and would free up a little bit, but it's somewhere in the order of a couple $100,000. It's not a lot, but timing of this might be such that, you know, we get the library completed and address any final cost considerations involved in that project. The atrium first, and then the atrium project has been identified for ARPA money, so that's kind of a separate thing. That's $1 million to $2 million in a project. But the city's appetite for bonding the entire thing, we just wanted to illustrate, and Ira has, I think, very well in his presentation, what that might mean to a resident of, you know, with a home or property that is of, say, this value and that value. I think it was $600,000 and $800,000, and what type of tax increase might be necessary would be necessary to sustain that if we have to go it alone in paying for it. I would advocate we continue to respectfully, I would ask council to consider directing staff to continue to investigate the options of a cost partner. That can come through a renewed RFP. That can also conceivably some further discussion with the two respondents that we did get, but I have to research a little bit more from a procurement standpoint, the degree to which we can negotiate from a proposal received. You know, there's might be some limitations on revisiting a proposal from a procurement standpoint, a proposal that's been received, and going in a completely different direction with one of those respondents. It might be cleaner to recast an RFP, include some additional incentives that the city could agree on, narrow that focus, maybe get a little better idea of precisely what the mayor and council would, maybe at least the minimum that you feel would be a really quality facility for the public, and with a hope that we could do more to try and get it into the feasible column financially. But you know, those are a consideration, as well as directing staff, if you wish, to spend more time in looking at alternative sites. I think we don't have one to recommend at this moment. It doesn't mean that one couldn't be ultimately identified. I think, Madam Mayor, you said it well when you said cultivate relationships. And I think a lot of that, and the potential in finding partner that has property in a location and, within the ward that is acceptable to the mayor and council and the community, and is also going to be feasible for the construction of what we wish to do, is something that will take some time, yes, and will take the cultivation of a relationship and a conversation with that property owner. And we could work on that and bring recommendations of our findings back to you all. So there might be several different fronts we could continue to pursue, but I believe there's clear evidence that staff has been extremely active in working on multiple fronts to try to move the project forward. It's ultimately a math equation to date, is finding the resources. It's not a lack of interest or will on your part or ours, and I think that's important for the community to know. But I do believe there is a lot of things that we could continue to do to try to achieve this really worthy goal of and needed facility for the community.
Thank you. Councilmember Fulcher.
Sorry, I'm gonna pull up your presentation here. So I'm not gonna be able to answer your question of exactly what I think you should do tonight. So I think this is gonna be an ongoing conversation that we can hopefully have quickly enough to take some action. So option number one, no. Option number two, yes. And, while we have our public works sitting on a field that Lee Jordan worked really hard for us to have, for the Black community to have, I am okay with us spending city money on making a recreation building happen. For land swap acquisition, I agree, it needs to be in Ward 6. I don't know enough about Ward 6, I don't live there, to say what spots are appropriate for a recreation center, and so I would be deferring to Councilmember Small and the mayor to understand what other properties might work. Re-engage with the RFP respondents. I'm hesitant on that one. I do think that updating the RFP and seeking other people to work with. I don't remember what we promised them as far as our financial backing for this project, but if when we put it out there, it looked like we were expecting to pay nothing for it, I could see why there would be other actors that weren't interested in engaging with us on that. And so maybe if we had a better idea of what our investment would be, people would be a little more willing to work with us. I do agree that, HCD is spread pretty thin and that we have a lot of balls in the air right now. And so that's another reason why engaging with somebody else who would be helping to take care of the project makes a lot of sense to me. So I look forward to working with my council members and working with staff on figuring out what the next steps are.
Councilmember Honzak.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry, let me try to see my comments here and look at your slides at the same time. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I want to echo most of what Councilmember Fulcher just said. I feel very strongly that our staff has been overstretched in this department and continues to be with the number of construction projects, the MMPA, and as Councilmember Small indicated, a lot of their time has been utilized for that purpose. And I'm anxious to see them not be spread so thin, because I don't think that this recreation center could have possibly had the bandwidth that it needed to move forward. And I'm hopeful that now that we have a city manager, that a lot of other pieces can fall into place. And I'm anxious to see that happen and allow the creative energy to be expended with a lot of different thought partners, really excellent ones that we now have on staff. I would like to see this recreation center happen as soon as possible, bearing in mind that quality is an issue and long lasting. But I think expediency is really important given how long this has been going on. So it sounds to me like using the existing site sounds like it's the very best option we have. A lot of the pieces are already in place. So I believe we should progress with that principle in mind, unless there is something expedient that someone else is seeing on the horizon that hasn't been explored here or presented tonight. I am wondering the degree to which, I'm sorry to be a broken record on this, but I took a little bit of time to look at the recreation facility development plan from 2010 to 2030. Perhaps there's another document that I'm not seeing, but that was the most up-to-date thing I could find. And it talked about county density goals, you know, outside of our city being 30,000 people per community center, and that the Vision 2030 for the county was to try to consolidate these centers into both swimming pool and recreational facilities that had all these different amenities in them. And so it begged the question for me. I tried to look at the demographics, but they were really kind of outdated, to just see if who somewhere, maybe the city has its hands on this data, but what does that data look like? Because I think the more that we can throw around the exact data points according to what the county's goals are, perhaps I think it would advance our own city goals. And I know that's probably been tried, but I'm anxious to see us try to force and compel our county executive to put some money on the table and a cost share and make it happen quickly. And let's see. And also I'm wondering if it's possible to build out this building in stages so that a new facility could be put up, you know, within a 2 to 3 year time horizon, but it might not be the full build out, and it could be actually utilized immediately so that recreation time in that physical space within Ward 6 is not lost. And I think that's all I have to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Siemens, I saw your light and then you lost it. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm not going to take a lot of time, and I don't really have any questions or direction. I have a wonder. I wonder, with all of the commercial property that's looking like it's ripe for development in that area, if there isn't a potential to work with one of those developers in putting together a plan that would include a community center, a recreation center. And again, going on Councilmember Honzak's suggestion that working with the county at that, you know, on a project like that might be an opportunity there somewhere. And to answer the options, I would say option number one doesn't sound like a good idea, but beyond that, I trust the expertise of our city manager and staff to come back with, follow whatever path it is that's going to bring back some good proposals for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Siemens. Councilmember Gibson.
Yes, I think I'll be short to it because not having all this information ahead of time, I need some time to review it. I would say that I am almost, but what our city manager has proposed in terms of looking at the scope, as Councilmember DeBalas said, VW, not the Cadillac. Yes, let's look into those options. I remember reading that the original plan had 3 components: a rec center and affordable housing, and then an income stream, tax stream, which that doesn't sound like it's too likely, but maybe if we, I guess on that point though, I guess in terms of scope and in mixed use, I wonder about market rate housing and whether we could change, give some dispensation, some incentive to give them more than 5 years before they have to comply. I mean, just different options. If recognizing that our primary is to get the rec center done. And if we can allow some market rate housing to go in that make that happen, then I would consider that. So another RFP that looking at the scope and looking at incentives as our city manager makes sense to me. But I'll get back to you with further concerns or questions or opinion. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, I'm bringing in the rear. So first, Ira, you know my dream wish, right? I do think that there are some parcels in the area that if I could write my Christmas list, what would I want? I have a name for this rec center in mind. So I do think that there are opportunities that require lots of legwork that we just haven't had the ability to invest in, that we may be able to seek out to identify a possibility for alternatives. I think that the options that are laid out, I kind of don't necessarily see them as an either or. So if I take 10 steps back, number one, I want a rec center tomorrow, but financially we have to wait. And so in my mind, that means we need to hold off a little bit, allow a lot of the dust, literally, to settle with the rec center and with the library to kind of see where we end up fiscally there, and then the atrium. But I think that while that dust is settling, we can simultaneously do some of the legwork to create the right environment to overcome the challenge that we have right now. So like what was mentioned in terms of the scope of the project or the size of the project, I've personally looked at this thing 50 different ways from Sunday. The current parcel is tight. It is very, very tight. And so the idea of kind of making the footprint smaller means that you're not going to really end up with much of a rec center. And so in my view, the priority is the rec center. I want something that is a pillar, a mainstay, something that kids from all around the city gravitate to, love, and enjoy, right? They do that now, but I want it on a bigger scale, right? And so I know that it's going to be really hard to get that on that lot with 10 stories of housing on top. Like those two things just don't match. And so in my mind, if we want a rec center, which I really do, it's either build what we on the lot that we have right now and the constraints that exist still, or if we're trying to do the mix, we have to identify an alternative site. And so I think that what we could do, instead of immediately going out for another RFP, is while we are dealing with the library and all these other things, we hire some help. Because I remember at a time when we actually had another body and they were actually able to go door to door and get to know all of the folks that were along the way. And then you could hear the stories like, oh yeah, no, we're thinking. I think that that's what we need to do in that area to try to get some of the relationships that necessarily need to be built so that we can understand what the current property owners in the area actually see for themselves. If we hadn't fostered relationships, like for example with the Grace Methodist, we never would have known that, hey, no, they're interested in building housing. So I think it requires us to do a lot of footwork to really just try to get to the point where we can identify the best location. That said, I know that we need to, to council members' point, like really try to make some progress and waiting is not enough. I think that we could, while we're doing these things, I think in my mind, and I guess this is a different conversation for a different day, when we start talking about budget, but bodies. So one of the bigger things is making sure that we have that economic development person that can go into HCD to really help us with kind of making some groundwork, and I don't know where we are in terms of the budget with that. Another big thing as I see it is really trying to figure out whether or not we need to start saving money now. So, we have different reserves. We have the housing reserve. Do we want to start making some plans in this budget season to start squirreling money away for funding towards the rec center that we may be able to use to help us with funding things like design work, and once we kind of get our ducks in a row, versus just immediately relying on someone else to come along and save us financially, or to do a bond. So I would be interested in trying to get a better understanding of, once we kind of get wrap our heads better around what it is we want to do, what are some of the pre-design work that may be helpful for us to start doing during these stages? How much money would it cost? Is it time for us to start putting in saving some money so that ultimately we could start making some traction, even though we may not be able right now to take out a full bond or to immediately have a partner ready? And I'm not going to keep droning on because my Dayquil is really asking for NyQuil. All right. Councilmember Fulcher.
I just wanted to say, I just want to remind everyone that our priority was to go back in for another RFP. It wasn't actually to get a recreation center this year. And so, I think that's where we are, right? We are ready to figure out what the plan is. We aren't necessarily ready to start shoveling that dirt and getting it going.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right.
Madam Mayor, do you mind if I just respond
Sure.
to a few pieces? First of all, from staff perspective, I very, very much appreciate this conversation. This has been extremely helpful for me in terms of understanding your priorities and understanding kind of some of the next steps we can take, because it is important for us. We understand that this has been a long road and this will continue to be a long road, but we need to move forward on that road, and we need to kind of get an understanding of your direction to be able to kind of take the appropriate steps. And so this has been extremely helpful for me, and I look forward to both sending you all some follow-up as well as having some follow-up conversations. I just wanted to kind of touch on a few pieces very quickly. One is, I think the project scope conversation is an important one, and one that we can come back with some proposals. I just want to point out that we can come back with a Cadillac. It still costs you money to buy a Cadillac, right? So we could certainly talk about what we can do to kind of bring that scope down, bring that ultimate dollar figure down, but there's still a dollar figure at the end of the day, and that is a conversation that I think we all still need to wrestle with and talk about. And I think in terms of things for council to think about and for us to kind of maybe talk about further, if there's an understanding of, okay, we could do this for a Cadillac, right? We're willing to go this far. That helps us refine that scope and refine kind of which path makes the most sense a lot more. So certainly not expecting that answer, and certainly not expecting kind of that full conversation right now, but just wanted to kind of, as we think about next steps, I think that's an important piece for us to weigh on. The other piece, and that I just want to touch on real quickly, is, as you pointed out, we can take some of these paths together, right? We're not kind of locked into a path. But I do think to make some progress here, we do kind of need to pick a lane a little bit here, right? We've got some funding to spend right now. We want to make sure we're spending it in a way that, advances us and is the most useful way to spend that money, so we don't have to come back and say, shoot, we need $300,000 again 2 years from now because we're going in a different direction now, right? So this has been a very helpful conversation for staff in terms of understanding your priorities and what that means for these options, and we'll certainly come back to you with some more feedback on kind of how we would propose to advance those steps. So very much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so last agenda item is a discussion of amending the city code to ban combustible engine powered leaf blowers. And this is a 15-minute-er. All right, who's gonna take us through that?
Still me. So, Madam Mayor, members of council, Ira Cowler, Acting Director of Housing and Community Development, thanks again for having me tonight. So here with another item, this is a proposed ordinance amending the city code, the city noise code specifically, to add a ban on combustion engine powered leaf blowers. So just for some context on this issue, late last year, the Montgomery County Council enacted a bill adding very similar bans to their noise control ordinance. So they added a ban on combustion-powered leaf blowers, a ban on the sale of them, as well as outlining kind of a reimbursement program for county residents who have combustion-powered leaf blowers that would no longer be allowed under the updated county code. The city has exempted ourselves from the county noise ordinance. We have our own noise ordinance here in the city. So if we would like to also ban combustion-powered leaf blowers, this is the mechanism for doing so, which is to make an amendment to, or make an ordinance amending our city noise control. So that is what is before you today. It is substantively similar to the county's ordinance in a few key ways, and then I'll outline one or two key differences. So the effective date for this ban, both for the sale and use of, sorry, I got to get my language right, of combustion engine powered lawn equipment is the same as the county's. So the ban on the use would go into effect in July of 2025. This also outlines a process for issuing a notice of violation or municipal infraction based on receipt of a noise complaint. As you recall, we have a noise control board within the code, but we have also outlined here a way for residents to identify violations and staff to verify them and be able to issue infractions based on that. And that's based on photographic evidence of someone using a combustion-powered engine. Leaf blower, excuse me. So that's it. The only other thing I want to add two quick pieces. One is, as I mentioned, the county version of this bill includes a rebate program. The city's does not, but as county residents, our city residents would be able to take advantage of that future county rebate program as well. Additionally, we do include in this ordinance here for the moment a ban on the sale of combustion-powered lawn equipment. Again, similar to the county's bill, we don't actually regulate business licenses, so this would be an infraction under the city's noise ordinance. The city attorney at the moment feels like that's appropriate to still include in this ordinance, but just wanted to raise it in case there were any questions here. And with that, I'll pause for questions.
Councilmember Gibson.
I just wanted to follow up on one of my constituents
Yes.
about the decibels.
Yep. So the proposed ordinance here does not change any of the existing noise control language. So existing within the noise control ordinance is that 70 decibel limit, as well as that 2-hour restriction that was mentioned during public comment. I confess I will have to refer back to my neighborhood services code enforcement team a little bit more before providing any recommendations on that piece, but we certainly can look into it.
It sounds like a reasonable thing to review and appropriate, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember DeBala.
Yes, thank you very much for putting this together. I agree. I think that's a leftover from when it was referring to combustion powered. So we might want to change that. Just for people's information, it's my understanding that the county council committee, Transportation and Environment Committee is talking next week about budget for the rebate program, and that the draft regulations are coming through to the Transportation and Environment Committee in March, and at that point, we would have certainty over what people keep telling us, which is that city residents are, and businesses are in fact eligible for the county rebate. So just to share that piece of information. I had a question about alternative enforcement other than the noise control board. So as I read this, tell me if I'm right, that the underlined parts are the new parts and the not underlined parts were there before. And so, setting aside for a minute the current proposal, the city council had decided not to appoint new members to the noise board because of, for lack of a better way to put it, low volume of complaints, which is great. But we never actually resolved that. So I'm gonna suggest that the subgroup,
Committee on committees.
the subgroup on committees, I was looking at Kara, but of course she's not here, meet in the next few days and talk about what we would like to recommend with respect to that. Because while we're in here making changes, I agree with what I think you said, that the primary mechanism enforcement is not going to be two neighbors complaining and bring it to a noise board. But there's going to be much more immediate kind of enforcement. And that might be it. I had a three-way conversation with a couple of other council members earlier today. If I'm forgetting something that came up, please let me know. I think this is great and I think we should do it. Oh, yes, there is one more thing. I'm so sorry.
No
I
worries.
would like to propose in the whereases, there's nothing about the climate benefits or the climate action plan that the city has. I wrote some language that I can send to the city clerk that would just add a whereas that says this is already in the climate action framework for the city. This is what we think it will do for us from that point of view, because it's kind of missing from the package. That's it, thank you.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Devala, cancel that light for me. All right, so sorry, I cannot see Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Honzak, do you have any comments?
I do. I have some questions. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thanks. I had forwarded this on to the city manager, but only a few hours ago, just to give you a heads up. So I think if he would like to respond, or someone else. I was interested in digging in a little bit more on some of the race and social disparities. I think the rebates are a really critical piece of any program that goes forward, and I'm happy to hear that county residents would be able to take advantage of that. But I'm wondering if the city staff has given any thought to other aspects of this. For example, it is my understanding, and I am by no means an expert on this, that the county is right now has a survey out with landscapers, and I have no idea, how many people within the city of Tacoma Park work as landscapers, but I'm sure it's not a very small number. And I can think of some just on one hand. And I think they both live here. They probably do some of their jobs here and some outside of our city. But what struck me was pondering kind of how under the new rubric they would charge any devices if they weren't just battery powered, and go back to home bases, to sort of do whatever they would need to do. I know there are different kinds of models of electric leaf blowers. But anyway, if you could just talk me through a little bit of that, because with Councilmember DeBala's support, it did, looked into the statement that's in there in the racial equity statement that we have in the cover sheet that was given to us. It says a ban on combustion engine powered lawn equipment could narrow racial and social disparities, and it sounds like that is primarily a calculation derived from the long-term health benefits to the users. But I think it fails perhaps to look at the short-term economic drawbacks, if you will, of the challenges that are inherent in this proposition. And I'm not suggesting that I'm against it, but I am asking that we make sure that we are doing our due diligence as a city, particularly given that I think we have a large number of people, potentially maybe even a higher concentration than in other parts of the county, that might be dependent on this for their shorter term income. And it's important that we consider maybe doing a survey or making sure we've got some of the electric infrastructure at some of our multifamily buildings and that kind of thing. So if someone from the staff could just speak to that, I would appreciate it. And it doesn't have to be now if you want to put it in writing.
And can I just jump in and say that there is a county, for people who haven't been following this blow by blow, there is a county county council office of legislative analysis, and they did a big long, they did racial equity, they did economic, they did so forth, and I just shared that this afternoon with Councilmember Honzak, and that's what she's referring to. So when they do the economic, when they do the equity assessment, they were including short-term costs and short-term benefits as well as the longer-term health costs. So they did consider costs in the short run, as I read it. But everybody can read it. We can get it around.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. You stole my thunder there.
Sorry.
I was also going to reference that equity analysis, which, I found quite thorough. Councilmember Honzak, I'd be happy to discuss it in more detail as a follow-up here as well. I think one of the big pieces, though, that was noted was the importance of the rebate program. And so, again, ensuring that city residents are eligible and able to both not just be eligible, but that we properly promote and provide outreach for that rebate program is going to be very important as well.
Could you just elaborate, though, very briefly right now from what you know, and if you don't, that's fine too, just for the public and for my sake too, but a little bit on anything that they shared with us about the need perhaps for some infrastructure, like charging infrastructure, and whether that may be also an economic impact. I mean, as I understand, the largest benefit is derived from the health side, and I'm sorry that I haven't been able to dig into that report yet, but I would appreciate just sort of an overarching statement about that kind of aspect beyond the rebates.
Sure. I have not considered the charging aspect angle, quite honestly. I would be happy to look into that a little bit more, though.
Okay, thank you. I think it is very important, given that we have a disproportionate number of renters in our community, and I think, like I said, I think there's a lot of people actually I know there's a lot of people in Ward 5 that derive their income from doing landscaping work, and there are some inherent challenges, and I don't dispute the enormous health benefits, but I think some of those short-term economic issues are just something that are really important to consider beyond the outright cost outlay of purchasing the equipment, that I think are very important for us to consider, and perhaps might imply some ordinance changes that might be important for us to consider at the same time as we're doing this for example, our multifamily buildings, and I just don't know enough about it. So I'll seek to look into that, but I guess I urge you as staff to take a look at that too, and perhaps put something before us as we pass this ordinance, if that should be deemed relevant. Thank you.
Councilmember Honzak, I just want to make sure I understand. So are you implying that people who are using these leaf blowers are using corded equipment? Many use battery-powered equipment,
Yes, although the batteries have to be charged, so I don't know how easy it is to get them all charged up. If you're working, for example, if you have a van and you put all your equipment into your van each day, and you normally rely on gas, but you're now going to be relying on batteries, you still have to charge up those batteries. They're generally rechargeable batteries. And so making sure that those small business owners have access to places where they can adequately charge their fairly large equipment that might be a number of pieces. I just don't know enough about it, but I would question whether, it's adequate in some of our multifamilies.
May I
Go
just say,
ahead.
without answering the question at the moment, that I'm looking at the staff report, and there's a whole technical section in there about all of this. So I think that we can look into this.
Yeah, I think it deserves special attention given the high number of renters and our rent stabilization policies in this part of the city. In this part of the county, in our city.
Again,
Thank
there's
you.
a whole section in here about that, so, thank you.
And we could consider a survey as the county is doing. That's just something else to consider.
If the
county
survey is still-
I think they're currently still doing their survey.
Yeah,
Then
I
let's
mean,
get it out
if,
to-
if the county is still doing their survey, and also because we don't issue business licenses, and we also don't have much control over the ban of the sale. Like, for most of these businesses, they're likely not going to your regular, I guess maybe you could go to your regular Home Depot to buy one, but I'm assuming that, if this is your business, like, you're probably gonna need more. I could speak from my personal experience. Like, my electric leaf blower, I need 2 batteries to finish the front and the back. How do I know? Because I do it myself, right? And so, I would assume that one of the hopes is that as the technology gets better, that some of these glitches will be addressed over time. But I do think that I think we can share, make sure that members in our community perhaps are aware that the county has their survey that's going on, encourage folks to participate in that. Is it closed?
I don't know.
No, it looked like it was still open.
I tried it today. It was still open, but I
Yeah.
don't know how well we've done. I know I had not circulated it previously, and I will attempt to do that.
Yeah. And then that way, we can encourage folks to participate versus us issuing our own. Okay. All right. Not seeing any more lights. So this will come back before us. So I do want to encourage folks, if you have any questions, because we will be moving to vote. If you have any questions, to please send your comments or questions over to Rob and Ira, and they can turn those comments around. Councilmember DeBala.
Can I ask one more thing? If we confirm that the survey is open, can we ask that the city communications person just put one shot out on the city social media, that would be another way to reach people, particularly in Ward 5 who are registered landscape folks?
Yep, certainly. I don't see a problem with that.
And can it be done in Spanish, please, as well? I think it's particularly important. A lot of the landscaping folks that I see around the city are largely Spanish speaking.
Sure, we'll review with the team tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
And let you know.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much. I think that's all we have for tonight. Everybody have a good night.